regain their spot at the bottom of pro basketball. The Minnesota Vikings are no longer in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. Apparently, after the Steelers made their intentions well known, apparently people are just like annoyed with Aaron Rodgers, who is just taking his time, standing on a beach. Porter sent me a picture of Aaron Rodgers standing on a beach in a blanket. I don't know where that was because he's no longer the quarterback of the Jets, so he's no longer my issue. But a lot of NFL offseason news. We'll kind of touch on some of that on the program today. Latest with the big story in the market, Alex Jensen hired as the head coach of the Utes. Latest rumors about him filling out his staff. We'll kind of get into some of that on the program today. And a lot to do on the program. We'll start things off today with Neil Smith. You know, I was telling Porter before we went on air, I was going to watch Carolina, San Diego State, and then Carolina went up like 20 in the first half. I'm like, you could tell that San Diego State had no answers. So I'm like, I'm going to watch the entire Utah Hockey Club game last night, and they got stomped. They got stomped by Edmonton, and it was not a close game at all. So the Utah Hockey Club trying to tread water to stay in the mix for that wild card spot. So we'll get you ready. It was 7-1 on the road at Edmonton. And Connor McDavid's a good player. That's my breakdown today. But Neil Smith will be our first guest. Former general manager of the New York Rangers to break down the world of pro hockey. Going to move over to Tim McMahon for our NBA Daily Assist. Chris Kamrani will have a Wednesday hit today instead of a Friday hit. And it is sunny outside, so we'll see if Chris will leave his house. And then an entire hour with Ken Pomeroy. And we will go over region by region to help you guys fill out your brackets today. Neil Smith, Tim McMahon, Chris Kamrani, Ken Pomeroy, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Wednesday to you, halfway through your work week, one day closer to the weekend. What was that picture you sent me of Aaron Rodgers? It looked like he was just standing on a beach wearing a blanket.
Yeah.
Pontificating on life or pondering.
It just looked like he's having a moment.
Where was that?
Honestly, it looked like me on like any sort of random weekend morning on a beach somewhere. And yeah, he looked he looked like he was a little disheveled, which was kind of interesting to see a millionaire star quarterback in that form. That's kind of his vibe now, I think, Aaron Rodgers.
At what point does everybody just say we've had enough? Because you can deal with a
5 years
malcontent
ago
if he's still a good player.
Yeah,
right?
I said it like I think when the Jets were trying to sign him the first time was like kind of when I was out on Aaron Rodgers, because I didn't think, and especially after the Achilles injury, it was really worth the risk on a guy that's now 40-plus years old playing the quarterback position at an NFL average level at best right now. For me, it's just not worth the headache. But, I mean, I'm not going to feel bad for Aaron Rodgers. He's got plenty to do, whatever he wants to do. I'm focused on the NCAA tournament and the madness we saw last night. Of course, if you are wondering, Spence, on True TV tonight after tournament, Eastbound and Down marathon and Impractical Jokers.
By the way, I forgot what an awesome show Eastbound and Down is because I was flipping back and forth, and then it was interrupted by commercials. And Danny McBride currently right now has a show on HBO called Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah.
I've told you this before. Danny McBride is one of the few creators that whatever he does, I'm giving a chance.
And it's interesting because even though some of it is just completely outrageous, it's all like actually just Danny McBride. He writes it all. He's part of the directing and producing of it all. So you do see like a creative product from one source. It's not like I feel like so much of it is commercialized, streaming NBC shows. You don't really know where the storyline's coming from, how many writers are involved. So the story actually is like you mentioned Righteous Gemstones. It's like 7 years of a real storyline that flows together. It's completely insane and ridiculous, but it's awesome.
Adam Scott has a cameo on Eastbound and Down as the agent that if I'm in a bad mood, I'll pull up that scene, and it is hilarious.
Yeah.
If you've never watched Eastbound and Down, make sure the kids are in bed. And
Yes.
if the significant other is a little bit squeamish for certain language and scenes, maybe leave her aside.
It's
or
an
him
HBO
aside,
thing
or
for sure.
It is.
Or catch it on True TV, and you got a censored version of it.
Indeed. So following the first four, I'm not going to take your bait because I've already made my point, and you can die on the hill you've died on. You've decided to live on. After the first four, which it is labeled by, but the people in charge prior to the tournament tomorrow, you can watch Eastbound and Down on True TV.
Did we at least get some madness, though? Will you cop to that?
The first game was awesome.
We saw a great game.
Yeah, then Carolina ran away from San Diego State. All right, we've misbehaved in the opening segment, so let's get to it. Neil Smith is our first guest. But before we get to Neil to talk some hockey on a Wednesday afternoon, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks, best place to get money, to get action, and hopefully win money on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Utah. The app is very easy to use. As I say every day, I would just encourage you to go get their free money, then try out the app. All you do is pick more or less on two-player stat projections for your chance to win up to 1,000 times your cash. For instance, the Jazz and the Wizards play tonight. The two worst teams in pro basketball play tonight here in Salt Lake at the Delta Center. Does Jordan Poole still play for Washington? I think he does, right? So Jordan Poole, more or less than, 75 three-point attempts. And then I think Walker Kessler might play. Walker Kessler, more or less than 2.5-point blocks. If you want to get action on Jazz Wiz tonight, then maybe you need some help. But anyway, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and you get $50 right out of the gates when you make that first $5 bet. Don't even need to win the bet to get the $50. It's just part of the deal. Our friends at Prize Picks hooking you up. Run your game all season long. All right, real quick, we do have a couple of local teams in action during March Madness. BYU welcomes in VCU. It's going to be Ball Arena, Denver, Colorado. BYU, after a very solid second season in the Big 12, some people feel like are underseeded a bit. I think that's probably right. You could make an argument for a 5 seed, as I've said all week. If I'm a BYU fan, I'm glad they're in Denver, and I'd rather have a 6 seed in Denver than a 5 seed in like Newark or whatever. But the matchup is a little bit problematic. And, a lot of national people really think BYU is built for a fun run. But BYU fans have so much PTSD from good teams not doing well, as recently as a year ago, that I think BYU fans just want to see a win in the NCAA tournament. The BYU Cougars have not won a tournament game since 2012, and that was a first 4 play-in game. And they have not advanced to the round of 32 since Jimmer Fredette was making it rain every night. Problem is, VCU is very well coached. You guys know Ryan Odom. He coached Utah State. And Ryan Odom, rumored to potentially grab the Virginia job that Tony Bennett left. Max Shulga is their point guard who played at Utah State. He's the A10 player of the year. He averages about 15 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, shoots 39% from 3, and is a problem as a guard. They have 3 really good guards. And they have 4 upperclassmen in their starting lineup, and 4 seniors, not upperclassmen. 4 seniors in their starting lineup. They have 2 players that have played in an Elite 8 that are grad transfers for Ryan Odom. And 3 of the seniors are 5th-year guys, and one of the seniors is a 7th-year player. They also have 3 6'10" players that oftentimes play together. And so ultimately, BYU, this is going to sound simplistic, but I do think you can be reductive with this matchup. BYU has to create space on the perimeter and knock down threes. But if they're not shooting well, and the problem with this tournament is we see so many good teams overcome by the moment, and they just can't get it done, and they don't shoot the ball well. And if BYU doesn't shoot it well from 3, I think they're in trouble. BYU is a 3-point favorite in this matchup, even though it's a 6-11 seed. I believe, and we'll talk to Ken about this, VCU, I think, is 31 in the net, and I think BYU is 25. A 6-team gap in the net is not a lot for a 6-11 seed. So I like BYU. I like the way they've been built. I think if they can create space on the perimeter, knock down shots, they have a shot to go to the Sweet 16 this year. But they've got to get out of a very tough first-round game against a defensive-minded pressure team that plays a lot like Houston. Ryan Odom does not have the personnel Kelvin Sampson has, but they want to get up in you. They want to play hard defense. They want to pressure you. And I'll be interested to see how Yegor Demon responds to the pressure that VCU brings, because he has not responded to pressure well all year long. That's when Kevin Young has had to go to Dallin Hall and taken Yegor Demon out. So we'll see. Utah State is at one of the most historic venues in college basketball, Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky, the home of the Kentucky Wildcats. And they welcome in a good, not great UCLA team. It's a 7-10 matchup. UCLA is I believe, a 5-point favorite. Don't quote me. I'm going to check the line during the break. And UCLA out of the Big Ten, which still sounds weird. Ultimately, they've got some really good wins this year. They beat Gonzaga at home, but they followed that with losses in 5 of their 6 games after that. They've got a win over Wisconsin. They've got wins over Oregon, Michigan State. They stumbled a bit down the stretch, going 3-3 to finish off, losing to Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Mick Cronin and Jared Calhoun, they're good buddies, according to what Mick had to say when the 5.5 is the line now. Thank you, Porter. So UCLA a 5.5-point favorite. So, Utah State with an opportunity. Once again, it's, I think their 4th straight NCAA tournament. I think it's 7 in the last 8 years or something. But 2 local teams in the tournament. The madness gets rolling tomorrow after the final 2 play-in games tonight on True TV. We'll get back to college hoops. We have Ken Pomeroy live in studio. We're going to go region by region, help you fill out your brackets. But a tough night for the Utah Hockey Club last night. Edmonton just trounced them 7-1. We'll talk some Utah Hockey Club, the race for the wild card with Neil Smith right off the bat on a Wednesday drive. Good to have you with us. Don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Tim McMahon stopping by the show today to drop our NBA Daily Assist. There's a big game tonight. The two worst teams in pro basketball are playing here in Salt Lake at the Delta Center. Washington, Utah. The race for the bottom is on. And then Chris Comrade from The Athletic. We're going to help you fill out your brackets during the 4 o'clock hour. And the great Ken Pomeroy from KenPom.com is live in studio. But the Utah Hockey Club went up to Edmonton last night, and they got their brakes blown off. 7-1, Edmonton gets the win. The Hockey Club trying to stay alive in that wild card race. So let's bring in the man that educates, entertains, informs when it comes to the world of professional hockey, the great Neil Smith. On a Wednesday afternoon. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Happy Wednesday to you, and happy belated St. Patrick's Day from Monday.
Yes, indeed. St. Patrick's Day, Monday, and, Neil, in case you didn't know, birthday for your guy over here. My birthday is St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, that's my sister's birthday. Well,
look at that.
That's great. Happy birthday.
Thank you,
I know
sir.
You're 26 now?
Oh, goodness, Neil. I'm aging rapidly, but I'm not that old, so I always feel bad when I say that I'm old, but I just turned 47.
Oh my, well, you're a youngster. You got a long way to go to catch me.
I appreciate it. But Neil, I'm old enough now to realize that just like physical pain is probably part of the deal, right? You just get up and the hip hurts or whatever. It's just kind of the deal, right?
That's just part of the aging system, is that everything seems to start working less efficiently as we go along.
Yes, indeed. Hey, before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of what happened last night and where we're at with our local hockey club, I've just got a question about Connor McDavid. And I know that people that really know hockey know who Connor McDavid is and what he is in the ecosystem of pro hockey. But I was telling my producer Porter during the break, like, even if you don't know a sport, you always know the guy that's different, right? And there's just something I don't know if it's just his speed. I don't know if it's just his skill. There's something about Connor McDavid that sets him apart from the best players every time I watch him play. What makes him as special as he is?
I think it's his speed. It's his fact that he's over 6 foot. He's about 6'3". He can do things at a higher rate of speed than some people could do it in with shoes on. He can do things on the ice at a very high rate of speed that people can't imagine. So I think that he embodies what people love about hockey, and that is the speed, the physicality, and the skill. And I think that he's certainly not a physical player in the sense of throwing out big body checks, but he can take whatever physical play you want to play on him. And I think that that's why you always notice 97. If you go to an Edmonton game, there's no way you're leaving without having seen and noticed 97 on the ice.
They had one play last night. They had a power play opportunity. And I honestly don't know how often hockey teams run like set plays the way basketball teams do, like a 1-4 flat, a pick and roll, or, whatever it is. But it was very intentional to get Connor McDavid the puck as he had momentum. And the rest of the guys looked like they were just flat-footed. I mean, it was pretty remarkable. What's your take on Edmonton overall as a team? I mean, obviously we're prisoner of the moment because they just stomped the hockey club 7-1. But I was very impressed with what I saw last night from the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, you'd have to be because that was a beatdown. But Edmonton is a very inconsistent team. You really don't know what you're going to get from one night to the next. They have the ability to do what they did last night, and they also have the ability to turn around and lose to a bottom feeder team because they're, for whatever reason. And last night, here's the impressive thing about last night, and it happened to be Utah. It could have been anybody. Anybody in that building last night was going to get beaten. The impressive thing for Edmonton was 7 goals, 14 assists probably on those 7 goals or however many. And Leon Draisaitl, the leading scorer in the NHL goals-wise, didn't get a point. So that means they had contributions from all kinds of people to get those 7 goals, but none of them were Leon Draisaitl. Usually you'll watch an Oiler game and Draisaitl will get 1 or 2. I thought he might get his 50th last night in Salt Lake. In Edmonton against Utah. but he wasn't able to do it. But just think how stacked is your team when your best scorer doesn't get a point and you win 7-1.
Oof. Yeah, that is impressive. I wonder, so Coach Torney pulled Vejmelka after Carell gave up 3 goals and went with Jackson Stauber. Didn't do any better. He gave up 4. But last night was Carell's 12th straight start in goal, and that's a career high. Connor Ingram away from the team, dealing with some personal things, as we discussed last year. Do you think you can draw a straight line? I just thought it was kind of ironic as the broadcast was outlining that Vejmelka had never started 12 straight before, and then suddenly the game starts, and he was up against it. There wasn't much he could do. Do you think it's a fatigue thing? Is that a concern now that there are other kind of first-choice guys on the sidelines, that Vejmelka looked as tired as he did last night?
It certainly could be it, because that's tough to keep playing night after night in the National Hockey League. In today's NHL, where you're playing almost every other day on average. So, it could be that. It could be a combination of him being tired and Edmonton also being at the top of their game last night. He played 2 days earlier in Vancouver. They fly over to Edmonton, get ready for that game. Now they've got 1 day off, and they're going to be tomorrow night against Buffalo. And that's just the way the NHL works. But it's hard when you're running one goalie all the time. And, Jackson Stauber is a fine young guy, but he's, is he ready for the show? I don't know. He wasn't up. The only reason he's up is because Connor Ingram has had to take this leave of absence. So we'll see. I mean, Vejmelka's a good goalie. Might have had an off night, or maybe Coach Torney thought that he was having an off night, so better to rest him, get him out of there. A lot of coaches too, if they're down 4-0 or to Edmonton, and they say, look, we're not winning this game, so I'm taking my guy out to give him a rest. Let him wait for the Buffalo game now. And you see that happen a lot.
So where we find ourselves now, and I don't know, like I was talking to a couple of guys with the hockey club that work on the broadcast side, and a gentleman who's producing games who used to produce the Arizona Coyotes games, and he's been around the NHL for about 20 years. And this was about a week and a half ago. And I said, do you think they're going to make it? He said, I don't think most people understand how hard it is to make up even 3 or 4 points over the final 15, 16 games. And he painted kind of a bleak picture as far as the hockey club qualifying for the wild card, Neil, and where we're at now is a 4-point gap with 14 games left to play. Have stranger things happen? Certainly. But what's the Neil Smith, I guess I'll say, like, handicap the chances of us seeing playoff hockey here in Utah this year?
I don't think they're very good because your friend was absolutely right. You've got to jump so many teams, and you've got to put together a string of wins. And even then, you might gain 2 points up, because here's the thing that people have to understand is, while it looks like you're only 4 points back of Vancouver and St. Louis, who are tied, everybody's playing every night, and everybody's getting points here and there, or teams in between you and that wild card spot are getting top points. Last night, a horrible thing for the Utah Hockey Club happened. Everybody thought that Calgary would go down to the Rangers. Calgary had gotten killed in Toronto the night before. They got in at 3 a.m. They put their backup goalie in, and they beat the Rangers. The Rangers had only 4 of their forwards had shots on net last night. So they put in a horrible effort. Calgary comes away with the 2 points. Stuff like that really hurts Utah's chance to jump over teams. Now, if they put together a string of 5 or 6 games and then go back to 500 after that, then they got a real shot. But they at this point, to hurdle over these teams who are playing every night, because what'll happen is you'll win a game, say you beat Buffalo, and then you'll look back at the standings and you'll say, oh my God, we're still 4 points behind. Well, the reason for that is because Vancouver went in and beat St. Louis on the same night as you beat Buffalo. So they got 2 more points. You got 2 more points. You're still the same number behind. So it's very difficult. You've got to put together a string of wins to make up some ground.
And only 14 games left. I mean, there's not a lot of opportunities now to make up the ground. Go ahead, Neil. Go ahead.
Let me give you the optimist side of this. They play only 8 games out of those 14. 8 of them are against non-playoff teams that currently sit in outside the playoffs. 8 out of their 14, meaning only 6 of the 14 are the battling playoff teams. They play Tampa Bay twice, once in Utah, once in Tampa. They play Florida. They play LA Kings, Winnipeg, and Dallas. That's the playoff teams that they got to play against. They got to make sure that when they get the chance, like with Buffalo, who's one of the weak sisters, last in the East, they got to take advantage of that, and they have to beat Buffalo on Thursday night to make up some ground that we've been talking about.
So if we just kind of exist in reality and we just admit that it's going to be tough while maintaining a little bit of hope, because that's what being a sports fan is, what would you say about what this year has meant to the club being in a new market? And what would you say to the fans about the future of where we could find ourselves based off of the way that Bill Armstrong and his staff have put together this roster?
Well, what I think is really optimistic and good or positive for this hockey club is that they've gotten to a new market. They've gotten settled in. They've got a fan base. They've got a beautiful arena. They're going to change the name, or even leaving it the same, will be changing it, if you know what I mean, because that's still something exciting that's out there that's going to happen in the off season. They got a lot of good young talent. They're an up and coming organization. They do have a cupboard that has quite a bit of assets in it. So I think that you're seeing a team, but we've talked about this from the first day, that's on the verge of getting into that group of playoff teams. And once you break into that, then somebody's trying to knock you to get you out and let them get in. And that's really hard, as you can see. But I think they've made mega steps since they've gotten to Utah compared to where they were at in Arizona. With Arizona, there wasn't a lot of hope. There wasn't a lot of money to be spent on free agents. Bill Armstrong was basically operating with one arm handcuffed. Now he's not. He's got a good owner. He's got a good fan base. He's got people that want hockey in that city, unlike Arizona. So I think you're miles ahead of where you were last year.
Neil, before I set you loose, I know you got to get going today. I wanted you to settle a debate that I was having with my brothers, actually, who are hockey guys, in a way that I just never have been entirely. I enjoy the sport, loved growing up, going to Ranger games and all that. We were talking about the Four Nations, and we were talking about the tournament because it was such a pleasant surprise for so many people that didn't think it was going to be anything all that entertaining. If Russia is allowed in, are they the best hockey country, or is it still Canada?
I'm Canadian, so of course I'm going to think that it's Canada, but I think that Russia produces a ton of great hockey players, and on any given year, it could go either way. I think that the only way you know who truly is the world's best team is when you have a full complement of countries in it, which includes Russia. But I don't want to see them in as long as they're going in and trying to take over other countries and do what they've been doing in the last 2 years. I just don't think that we should ignore that. I think that we should, say, okay, in our little world of hockey, if you're going to do that, you're not part of our world. So, but they are a tremendous breeding ground for hockey players.
Neil, where can our listeners go find the podcast before I set you loose?
Anywhere on any platform, NHL Wraparound. We had Paul Maurice, Stanley Cup winning coach, on a couple of weeks ago, and we're coming down the stretch here, and we're looking at everything as closely as we can and give you everything we can of tidbits on the NHL. But you know who I'm going to dinner with tonight?
Who's that?
Your father.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Very nice. Where are you guys going to go?
In the city at Wolfgang Steakhouse. And Amy Kay will be there, and Ken Munoz will be there.
Oh,
so
that's
I know
great.
You know all those names. So that it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, and you're going to Wolfgang's. He likes you more than he likes me. He takes me to Chick-fil-A when we go to dinner. So enjoy your steak, Neil. But please tell him hello and tell everybody hi and have a good time, okay?
Thanks, buddy. See you soon.
All right, the great Neil Smith, the Utah Hockey Club. Yeah, they got dog walked last night. Hey, like I was telling Porter, I was going to watch that Carolina-San Diego State game, and after Carolina ran away with them, I'm like, all right, let's check out the Hockey Club. And I turned it over in time to see Edmonton put 3 on Vejmelka in the first period, and then Coach Torney pulled Vejmelka and decided to try his hand at the Stauber kid as Connor Ingram is still on the sidelines. And all due respect to Stauber, it didn't go better for him at all. Jackson Stauber allowed 4 goals after Vejmelka allowed 3. And it's just going to be tough. You know, ultimately, I would love to see it happen. Playoff hockey rules. If you've never seen Stanley Cup playoff hockey, you should check it out. It's a lot of fun. Connor McDavid, what's the equivalent of a Connor McDavid in another sport? Like, if somebody doesn't know the game of basketball, they could turn on a Warriors game and tell that Steph is just different based off the way he makes shots. I was just watching that game last night, and I don't grind on hockey tape every night, but every time McDavid got the puck with a full head of steam, it's like that dude is different.
It's hard. Number one, I'm, to be clear, not Neil Smith. I haven't won a Stanley Cup, so my hockey expertise. Not yet, of course. You never know who the Smith Entertainment Group might hire as the hockey team keeps going on. But no.
Are you throwing your name in the ring if Bill Armstrong moves on? You want to be the GM?
Why not? Hell, why not? But the name you brought up was Steph Curry. And while he is like a similar, we talked about the term gravity in sports, and he has that. It's not as much on the scoring side as it is creating, right? You look at Wayne Gretzky, and I think if you take out like all of Wayne Gretzky's goals, he still is like second all time in scoring with all the assists that he creates. And Connor McDavid has more of that than he does, say, Alexander Ovechkin, who just puts shots in the back of the net over and over and over and over again. So it's really interesting to watch because he creates for his teammates as he is. Every player has a little bit of it, but the way he does it, you're just seeing open shots for other guys, and that is something that I don't know how to compare that in the NBA ranks, like LeBron-ish, like a guy that has the scoring title, but also kind of is more of a passer. That's he's not 6'9", 260, but that's like kind of the name I look at. A Magic Johnson, a LeBron, a guy that puts up a bunch of points and somehow has the gravity to bring in the players around him. Luka Doncic, if you're looking at kind of a new era, new age guy.
It was wildly impressive. Now, the hockey club has a uphill climb at this point. As I referenced, 14 games left to try to make up a 4-point gap. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. Coming up on Thursday, so tomorrow, Buffalo's in town. 3-game homestand for the hockey club. It's Buffalo, it's Tampa Bay, and then Detroit. Then a 3-game road trip. Following that, it's a 4-game homestand. Then they're going to finish off with 3 on the road at Dallas, at Nashville, and at the St. Louis Blues. Neil Smith joins us today, courtesy of our friends at IFA Country Stores. Now, the snow will melt at some point, maybe over the next couple of days. We're high speed ahead to 70-degree weather next week. So it's time for you to start thinking about your lawn care. IFA Country Stores has everything you need to care for your lawn. No matter its size or shape, their 4+ lawn care program can promote a healthy green lawn for you this summer. They're the same products used at many local sports fields, golf courses, and city parks. You can consult IFA's team of experts. For your yard this season, visit them online at ifa.coop or stop by one of 18 Utah stores today. IFA Country Stores, helping to grow the things that you love. All right, we will catch a break. Coming up on the other side, we will preview a massive game tonight in Salt Lake at the Delta Center. The Washington Wizards in the house to take on the Utah Jazz. And then we'll talk some big picture NBA with Tim McMahon. Chris Kamrani makes his weekly appearance later on. And then Ken Pomeroy, an hour in studio with our guy Ken. We're going to help you fill out your brackets so you can get those in prior to the start of the tournament tomorrow. So it is the drive on a Wednesday, and you are halfway through your work week. You are one day closer to the weekend. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Going to help you fill out your brackets today. Ken Pomeroy, the legend himself, KenPom.com, is live in studio. During the 4 o'clock hour, we're going to go region by region. We'll preview some of the local stuff and get Ken's reaction on the hiring of Alex Jensen, which became official yesterday. On Monday. I was there. Should know. Chris Camerati from The Athletic later on. But there is a massive game tonight here in Salt Lake City at the Delta Center as Washington rolls into town to take on the Utah Jazz. Our next guest covers the Jazz and the NBA as a whole. And Tim McMahon, if Wizards Jazz can't get you to Salt Lake, I don't know what to do, man.
Yeah, well, I would say if things go the Jazz's way tonight and then again in the lottery, I'll probably be making a lot of trips to Salt Lake City next season.
All right, there you go. There you go. So what are we expecting tonight? The Jazz released the injury report. Lowry is out with, quote, personal reasons. Walker is available. John Collins out. Neither of these teams obviously want to win this basketball game. They're both stuck on 15 wins. The Jazz have 2 more losses than Washington. But what sort of game are we in for here in Salt Lake?
You know, it's crazy. The Wizards actually haven't been playing terrible basketball.
I know, it's true.
Since the trade deadline, and they got a couple of vets in there. They got Chris Middleton. They got Marcus Smart. How about the Wizards sweeping the season series with the Denver Nuggets? It's incredible. But, they've made up some – and they were in danger of, historically horrendous territory. And, there is kind of this thing of dude, do you want to have losing just seep into every pore of the culture of the franchise and those habits? And so they've been playing better basketball. But tonight, obviously this is a Tankapalooza type of game. And I don't know that it's one that I would purchase tickets to see. Perhaps some, league pass drive-bys just for comedic reasons. Listen, I enjoy the Walker Kessler really leaning into the player development aspect there, and maybe he can get up 10 or 12 threes tonight. He got 11 in the last 2 games after I think 6 all season before that, something like that. So I enjoy Walker Kessler stretch 5.
That's got to be the Jazz trolling the NBA, right? After they find them for sitting marketing, they're like, "Oh, okay, if you're going to find us, we're just going to let our big guys shoot threes all game."
Well, listen, trolling the NBA, I don't know. That's aggressive. What I would say about it in all seriousness is this. Walker works on his threes every single day. He would love to be a Brook Lopez type of stretch 5. And at this point in the season, I would say there's no downside in letting him fire away. Maybe he stumbles into something and becomes comfortable, and it's actually a tool in his tool belt at some point moving forward. Certainly, he's likely to do something like go 1 of 11 from three-point range over 2 games that, quite frankly, are in your best interest to lose. So there's not a downside there, but it is it's not like, the guy's never walked out to the three-point line and fired one up. He does it every single day, and he's trying to develop that. So, give him a shot. Hey, I remember when the Mavericks were tanking trying to get Luka, suddenly Salah Mejri, I don't know if you remember the Mej.
Oh, wow.
But Salah Mejri was firing up some threes. And
Sure.
The funniest thing is there was a total Tankapalooza game late in that season in Memphis, and the Mavericks won it because Salah Mejri got hot from three-point range.
That's a good pull. I haven't heard that name in a while. And, Walker has a decent stroke. It's not like I can remember the Jazz used to, every preseason, there would be a video on social media of Gobert hitting a corner 3, and they'd be like, "Hey, stay tuned." I'm like, "Don't do that. That's not right. Don't do that with Rudy." But Walker actually has a decent stroke. You know what I mean? It doesn't look like it's aesthetically unpleasing. It's pretty fundamentally sound. Maybe someday he can develop it to a point where occasionally, when it makes sense, he'll be able to knock one down.
Well, unfortunately, the counterpoint to that would be he's not a good free throw shooter.
Yeah, it's true.
Typically, guys who are able to stretch their range out, it's like, hey, they're good free throw shooters, and then that's an indication that the 3-point ball is a possibility. However, I mentioned Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez was a prototypical back-to-the-basket scorer for the first half of his career. It wasn't until Kenny Atkinson got to Brooklyn pretty deep into Brooks' time there. It was his last season in Brooklyn, I believe, that he started marching his butt out to the three-point line and firing away. And then they just leaned all the way into it, a couple stops later for him when he got to Milwaukee. And now he's like the epitome of a rim-protecting stretch five, that's absolutely a new archetype of big man in the NBA. And if you've got a guy who can protect the rim and then you have to guard him on the three-point line, like that's a big-time weapon. I don't think it's necessarily likely that Kessler becomes that, but why not, like, at least at this point of the season when, you're trying to stack your lottery odds as high as possible, why not lean all the way into it?
For sure. I mean, at this point, try whatever you need to try because we all know what time it is. But since I referenced the Jazz being fined, Tim, for sitting Markkanen, can you help us understand this? I mean, ultimately, it feels like teams sit players every single night and star players every single night. Like, why the Jazz? Why with Lowry? What happened here?
Because it was an extraordinarily aggressive tanking measure, and if we're being real honest, this is 3 straight years this time that the Jazz were extraordinarily aggressive with tanking measures. That's the simplest reason. And then what was it, like 9 straight missed games?
Correct. Yeah.
Look, let's just be real. It was pretty flagrant violation of the player participation policy, and so they hit him with a $100,000 fine. And look, if you end up with Cooper Flagg, you'd pay $10 million in fines to get there. So, it's not pretty. It's not fun, but it is in the best interest of the Jazz to be tanking aggressively, and the league called them out on it because what they were doing marketing was pretty flagrant.
Yeah, and there's no debate as far as how they were handling it. It just feels like it happens across the landscape of the league. So I don't know. I thought it was odd that they just honed in on the Jazz.
Well, but there's been an investigation in Philly. They investigated the player participation policy violations with the Oklahoma City Thunder, the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, for a game that they won by double figures against Portland, despite sitting their top 6 players. So it's not only the Jazz, but again, I really the real honest answer is that the Jazz have been pretty aggressive tankers, at least late season, in each of the last 3 years. I don't know if I've told you this before, but when the Mavericks tanked the last couple games a couple years ago, when they had that top 10 protected pick and post-Kyrie trade, things did not go well, and they couldn't win, and they're at a point where, hey, they had a small chance of being a play-in team, but the most likely scenario, if they'd have kept their foot on the gas, was they'd land the 11th pick, which would have gone to New York, so they tanked. I called the league office, and I'm talking to somebody at the league office, and I'm like, hey, are you guys going to make any kind of comment? Is there going to be any kind of punishment? And this person said, have you called me about the Jazz? And my response was, has Ryan Smith been fined $600,000 recently for publicly discussing tanking measures? Yeah. Has that happened in the last few years? Oh. And so, the Mavericks were repeat violators of flagrant tanking. And, had actually been fined before. And then this is the first time. And look, $100,000 is a slap on the wrist. Let's just be real. But they got slapped on the wrist, and because they've been very aggressive over multiple years now.
So you referenced something with Washington, the concern of allowing, losing to permeate throughout the culture of your organization. And with Washington, we're a little late for that conversation. My goodness, that organization, whenever Jazz fans get in their feelings, I'm like, dude, you look around the league for a little bit. Namely Washington. But I always believe, Tim, when there's a team that has leaned into simply losing consistently, while I understand and agree with oftentimes the approach, there has to be a little bit of a danger for the Kyle Filipowskis and the Isaiah Colliers and the Keontae Georges of the world to get accustomed to this. Now, what I will say is the past month and a half, there have been several games where the Jazz have been close at the end against good teams, which I think is valuable experience. But is there a danger to leaning into this when you are trying to develop young players and teaching them how to be professionals?
Well, there absolutely is. And that's why I think that this is an extraordinarily tough task for Will Hardy, because ultimately Like, he's responsible for establishing the standards and the, what's unacceptable, and, really instilling the kind of culture that he wants. And look, that's why, there have been instances, for example, where he's publicly called out the complete lack of effort defensively, and young players have lost minutes because they haven't had the level of acceptable effort defensively. So it's a really no pun intended, kind of a no-win situation for a coach. But the challenge is, you understand the organizational path, right? And you've got to get high-end talent to ever have any chance of getting that thing turned around. And you get what the easiest way to get there is, but you just can't let bad losing habits seep in. And honestly, that was a huge issue in Houston during their 3 years of blatant tanking after the James Harden trade. Ime Udoka was able to come in and fix those problems really quickly. I do think that Will Hardy's got a very bright future as a head coach. I do think that he has a level of authority and respect in that locker room. And then, the other thing is, like, hey, if these guys don't live up to those standards, they won't be there very long. And so if they don't respect what he's trying, the standards he's trying to enforce, then, they'll probably be looking for a job somewhere else.
Sarah Todd, Deseret News, friend of the show, wrote a piece last week that has received a lot of traction, and we talked about it with her on the show. And essentially, it felt like she was talking to somebody at the organization, and I think she probably was, that has now kind of coined the term of the last 3 years were a teardown, and the rebuild starts now. All right. Like, you and I have talked about.
I've got a pretty good idea who she's talking to, but go on.
All right, fair enough. And I guess that's a spin you can put on the situation 3 years later when you didn't handle it the right way from the start, is my opinion on that. But if the rebuild starts now, Tim, does it feel like next year is going to feel a lot like this year?
You know what? I think that depends on a lot of factors. And frankly, one of those factors is, do they win the lottery? And if so, the second factor would be, how ready is Cooper Flagg to make an immediate impact? Now, look, is there going to be like some massive jump in wins next year? Are they going to, be a 6th seed in the Western Conference? I mean, highly unlikely. But again, if Cooper Flagg is as good immediately as people think he might be, who knows? Yeah, and then, like, say they win the lottery, how do they approach the rest of the summer? Are they aggressive to kind of get veterans in there to put a realistic competitive team on the court? Stranger things have happened. The Detroit Pistons won 14 games last year. They're in 6th place in the Eastern Conference right now. So I'm not saying it's impossible. I am saying, one, the West is a lot tougher than the East, and two, for that reason and others, it's pretty unlikely. And typically rebuilds are multiple year processes.
So interesting though, because according to what Sarah wrote, let's operate off the fun hypothetical that Lady Luck shines on us here in Salt Lake in a way that it hasn't so far. And the Jazz, it's wild. The Jazz have only been in a lottery 9 times, but they've had 9 chances. They've never moved up outside of a trade that they've made. That's how they got D. Will. But if it actually goes down and Cooper Flagg is a Jazz man, Sarah kind of pontificated on the possibility of actually that being the start of the timeline for what they're trying to build, meaning, do you move on from Lowry now that you're going to be able to once this offseason comes down? Do you even consider you move on from Walker Kessler, which she pontificated about in her piece for the D News? Like, if they get the prize of Cooper Flagg, the tone and tenor of the piece was, okay, now we start our rebuild and maybe we move on from everyone. Because, Tim, if we're honest, outside of Lowry and Walker, I don't know. I just don't. I think there are moments. Go ahead.
I would say it's fair to say you don't know. I think it's premature to say none of these guys can be contributors to a competitive team.
Oh, sure. I wasn't saying that.
Now, but look, like the Lowry thing, hey, you've got to consider all options. And if you're building around, Cooper Flag's going to be 18 next season. So, like, it's probably unlikely that he's going to be able to drive winning right away. And like, I think you have to be open-minded to all possibilities, and you have to, just like they did last summer with Lowry, you have to be willing to listen to conversations. You have to be, even willing to begin conversations, to initiate conversations. He's not untouchable. You can't win 15, 16, 17 games and consider somebody untouchable. Now, having said that, I would be pretty hesitant to move Walker Kessler because he's 23 years old. He's going to be, he's the type of guy who I think can be a high quality role player on a good team. And I think he's got at least a decade-long runway in front of him. And again, we're basing this on, like, hey, they win the lottery. It's Cooper Flagg, who's supposed to be just a potential, like, tremendous impact defensive player, like a Andre Kirilenko type of defender. If you have that type of defender with one of the two or three best rim protectors in the league, that's the foundation of potentially an elite defense for a long time. The asking price was very high for Walker Kessler. Even going back to last summer when people thought the Jazz might be down on him, maybe it could be had for a discount. And I don't see any reason that would change.
Were they ever close moving on from Walker either last offseason or prior to the trade deadline this year?
Not to my knowledge. I've not heard. I know there's been a lot of teams that have inquired about him. To my knowledge, there's never been anything that was a serious consideration.
So let me revisit what I said. And I didn't mean to imply that none of these guys are ever going to turn out. I just very much have questions about all of them. But if I removed Lowry and if I removed Walker from the equation, who do you think, based off of what you've seen, has a chance to be here when they are good again?
Well, unfortunately, we barely have seen Taylor Hendricks, and, we'll see if he's even ready for training camp next year. I know they're very encouraged by the progress that he made last summer after a tough rookie season for a kid who was a teenager at the time. Isaiah Collier has definitely had stretches of really endearing himself to Will Hardy this season. Keontae George is, in some ways, is kind of like Walker, where the second season has been disappointing. I think he's more of a Jordan Clarkson than he is a Darren Williams. I don't think he's ever going to be a lead guard for somebody. Can he be a bench bucket getter? I could see that. And then honestly, this year's rookies, like let's see summer league. Let's see how they handle the summer. I mentioned Collier, but I'm talking about like Cody Williams, Filipowski. Filipowski's shown a little something. I think he's a bench player if he's able to carve out a long career. And then Cody Williams, like, let's be honest, he's more of an idea than a player at this point. This summer is going to be huge for him.
All right, one more Jazz thing, then we'll move on from this. And like you, I don't do the, draft grind on tape every day thing the way that people do it that have it as a full-time gig, like your guy Jonathan Givony or others that cover the draft. But it does feel like, even when Wembanyama was there to be had, you had hipsters and NBA media say things like, well, I kind of like Scoot. And you're like, all right, dude, whatever. But it feels like we've moved into a space where at the start of the season, you would hear Dylan Harper, you would hear Ace Bailey, you'd hear VJ Edgecombe. And after what Cooper's done, is it safe to say that, like Wembanyama, this is Cooper on his own level than everybody else after him, based on your understanding?
That's my understanding. And, I've talked a little bit to scouts and executives, and if Cooper Flagg's not the number one pick, people throughout the league are going to be absolutely shocked and dumbfounded. So, I would say that would put him very much on his own level.
You brought up the Detroit Pistons. Do you still stay in contact with Dennis Lindsay? And I wonder what sort of role he's played in kind of this resurgence.
Yeah, you know what? I'll be honest with you. I have not been in touch with Dennis this season. I've not. I don't get east a lot, and I haven't run into him this season. But I would say that he had his fingerprints all over a very productive off season for the Mavericks a couple of summers ago, and the Pistons made it a priority to hire him with a rookie general manager in Trajan Langdon. They obviously also had a very productive off season. And so, look, you start the credit with a guy who's in charge and making the decisions in Trajan Langdon. But Dennis Lindsey's got an awfully good track record, and this is two straight summers that he's been part of a front office that's made some moves that really paid immediate dividends. And you got to think he had something to do with it.
All right, before I set you loose, the big news story regarding the local sports scene is that it is official as of Monday afternoon that Alex Jensen is the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. The Jazz played the T-Wolves a few nights ago. Gobert post-game was asked about the hire, and Rudy gave a great answer. It's up online. It's up on the Utah page, the Jazz page. Will Hardy was asked about Alex. I mean, everybody said everything that you would expect, and I know that you know Alex, and this is a bit redundant because I did ask you about it last week, but now that it is official, as somebody who covers both the Jazz and the Mavs, tell Ute fans what they should know from your experience about their new head coach.
Yeah, I didn't actually see Rudy's comments. I would be interested to see those because, look, I've said it before, like, other than Rudy Gobert, nobody deserves more credit for that raw, gangly, goofy young French guy developing into a future Hall of Famer than Alex Jensen. Alex, I think, has a great feel for player development. He has been a very successful head coach at the G League level. I think that his style of very, direct communication is I think it's a great approach. I think that the recruiting stuff, like, his hires as assistant coaches are going to be very important because he's not necessarily a naturally gregarious type of guy. I also think that the alumni, the alumni donations to the NIL fund are going to be even more important than that. If Alex Jensen is a heck of a coach, if he has the support that's necessary to win in college basketball, I think he's going to do so.
Is the all right, March 25th, Tim? The book is on its way here in the next little bit. And so, two questions: where can people go get it? And number two is, based off of this next iteration of Luka's career, are you considering additions to this book? I mean, there's a lot of Luka Doncic basketball left in front of us.
No, listen, the last edition of this book, there's actually 8,000 copies were printed before the trade. Every other copy, the ebook, the audiobook, all those, they've got the last chapter that I wrote in the 2 weeks after the trade, and it's kind of a perfect ending to the story. It's his entire run, all the drama, all the dysfunction, all the chaos, all the success, and the shocking plot twist at the end of his tenure with the Dallas Mavericks. Will there be another Luka book? Will there be a Luka Lakers book? That's a great question to ask when you have Dave McMenamin on.
Okay.
I've handed old Mac 10 the baton.
Okay.
But no, I appreciate you mentioning that. As far as where to get it, everywhere you get books, you can, Amazon right now, you can get the, hey, if you want to go for the Triple Crown, you can get the ebook, you can get the audiobook, and you can get the hard copy. Old school, pretty cover and all that. So, some people in Dallas are boycotting the book. It's actually pretty humorous. There's a conspiracy theory that I was colluding with Nico Harrison over the last few years to run Luka Doncic out of Dallas.
What? Oh my gosh! All right, well, yeah.
Never underestimate the creativity of the angry internet, Bob.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Thank you, my friend. Have a good week. We'll chat soon. Okay.
I appreciate you, brother.
All right, the great Tim McMahon. Yeah, his book comes out officially on March the 25th, called The Wonder Boy. It's about Luka Doncic. Tim stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at Burt Brothers, with over 30 years of experience and nearly 30 locations. Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction, industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. It's a one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. CK, Chris Camerati joins us coming up on the other side. Ken Pomeroy live in studio during the 4 o'clock hour. We're busy on a Wednesday, so keep it right here on ESPN 700. Hey, it's sunny and, kind of nice. Why aren't you sitting across from me today?
I have a sick kid home with me,
Okay.
who is getting to digest all of the cartoons, and he knows that he can milk it for as long as he can. So that's where we find ourselves in this chapter of parenthood.
Godspeed. What's the deal with the track today? I know nothing about it.
Um, well, I guess in honor of the Happy Gilmore 2 trailer, I'm going to my happy place.
Okay.
And my happy place is jam band music in the summertime, which is about as opposite as it can get from right now.
Jam band music
But
in the
we're close.
Yeah, jam band music in the
yeah.
summertime. I'm with you on that, CK. I'm with you on that.
I know you are. I know you are. And I think if you got it, Lake Street Dive, saw him at one of the Twilights, one of the years, fun jam band from Boston. I think you would dig him, man. I mean, I know that you can get a little bit, you can get down with the jam bands. I know that if you can let the guitarist riff for a while, maybe let the trumpets go, you can get into it.
Oh, you'll find me shoes off, gummy, jam band summer at some point. You'll find me at some point this summer with no shoes and a gummy enjoying it. There's no doubt.
One with the earth.
Yes. Well said, Chris. Well said, CK. Lake Street Dive. Okay, I'll check it out. What are the kids into? When Connor was Leo's age, it was Blue's Clues, it was Dora, it was that dumb Barney, that freaking purple dinosaur. Oh my gosh. None of the cartoons that Connor liked were digestible for adults. What's Leo into these days?
There's a show called Paw Patrol.
I've heard of Paw Patrol, yes.
And as soon as I said it, he looked over at me and smiled.
Nice.
There's a show on PBS called Wildcrats, which is cool because it's like a human to cartoon show where these two guys are supposedly like adventure anthropologists, Indiana Jones types, and they go into the world of animals in a cartoon version. So he likes that as well. But it is reprehensible to say the least. I spend a lot of time with my AirPods in, let's just say that.
Yeah, if somebody could create a cartoon that kids love that adults kind of latch on, SpongeBob doesn't count. Like if you could create a cartoon that kids are glued to that adults don't want to rip their hair out, I think that's $1 million idea.
There's this show called Bluey out of Australia, and it's about an Australian shepherd and its family, and the episodes are very short, and it is tender and it is heartwarming, and it is one that actually is decent, and it is the one show that my son cannot stand. So the irony in that is very thick.
Yeah, and I'm out of the market for having children. Mine's grown, so I'll never experience it. Did you ever have to watch Dora the Explorer for any reason at all?
I did not, but I remember hearing about it.
Dude, it just like I can sing the map song still to this day, and it used to bother me so badly. But let's move on from that into more nonsense. So Porter and I were talking earlier. NCAA tournament time means we have to get familiar with True TV, and True TV is airing reruns of Eastbound and Down after basketball. Did you consume Eastbound and Down?
Maybe my favorite comedy show of all time.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. I mean, so much so that back when streaming wasn't really a thing and you had to buy episodes on Apple back in the day. Do you remember this?
Of course.
Yep.
Of course.
I have them all on my phone still, all these years later. And travel days, like when you're on one of the Delta flights that doesn't happen to have the Wi-Fi connect or doesn't have the screens, I pull it up, man, and I just sit in my window seat and I just laugh out loud. And I probably look like a weirdo, but it is a show that takes me to a place that just makes me happy. It's brilliant and offensive and no way could be done today. But man, it's so ironic you bring that up. My buddy and I were driving home from our indoor game on Monday. We were talking about Eastbound and how much we loved it. And yeah, it's a great show. Probably my favorite comedy series of all time.
The Adam Scott cameo as the agent kills me every single time. But Danny McBride, for me, is a benefit of the doubt creator. Like if I hear that Danny McBride has done something, he's got my attention.
I mean, I'm with you without a doubt. I think, yeah, that show also had like insane cameos beyond Adam Scott. Like Craig Robinson as the one-eyed like villain, the antagonist, the guy who Kenny took out his eye. Will Ferrell, elite as the car salesman, Ashley Schaefer.
My plums.
McConaughey was in it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else.
Marilyn Manson had a cameo in it.
Sudeikis as his best friend, Shane, who did body surfing in Myrtle Beach, and Ike Barinholtz as the like, it is so bad, and it is so. I mean, like if I know there is the 20% of the drive Monday to Friday 2 to 6 it gets too woke. I don't think this for your listeners. This is where we're a little anti-woke on Eastbound and Down, but it's a great show. It's funny. Danny McBride has carte blanche. Vice Principals was amazing. I don't know if you saw that. It was only 2 seasons, but kind of Goggins's like coming out party from like a comedic point of view and laid the groundwork for maybe my favorite comedy character of all time, Uncle Baby Billy in Righteous Gemstones. Like yes, to your point, got there eventually. Danny McBride can do no wrong.
Is Walton Goggins properly rated? It feels like he is having a moment because are you watching White Lotus? He's killing it in White Lotus.
He is, and he was really good in Fallout, which is a adaptation of a popular video game like 10 years ago. But yes, he is. I think he's having his having his moment. Justified. I don't know if you saw Justified. He was great in Justified. So, but Baby Billy. Man, like
so good.
The song when he's singing with like the clam on his back, hallelujah, what a payday at this fake Jesus resort. I mean, we could go on for hours.
If you're having a bad day, just Google Will Ferrell, Craig Robinson, Danny McBride, Eastbound and Down outtakes. That's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not kidding.
Let the boy watch.
Let the boy watch. All right. Well, last week we did 15 minutes on Philip Seymour Hoffman. So
we did.
Yeah, you never know where we're going to go. But we will move on now and talk a little sports. So it is official, Christopher, that Alex Jensen has been hired as the 17th head coach in Utah men's basketball history. Press conference was on Monday night. We did the show at the John M. Huntsman Center on Monday afternoon. Actually, let me start here. It's going to get a facelift, the Huntsman Center is, and it could be a massive construction project. Several boxes have to be checked before we're there. And I am one, certainly as I age, that I'm prone to nostalgia and memories, and walking into the Huntsman Center on Monday certainly reminded me of a lot of fond days when Alex was playing and I was a student at Utah, and the Huntsman Center has a lot of history. But I think this is probably the right move, yeah? I mean, it feels like it does need a little love, yeah?
Without a doubt. I mean, if you look at that campus, even from the time I went to school, which is 16 years ago, like it is night and day just from the academic facilities. Like the buildings that were up there when I was there was like, if that earthquake hits that's supposed to hit, we are all done. Like we are in a building that is like Mad Men era built. So the fact that they're going to give a facelift or, potentially have a new place for what I would assume will be called the Huntsman Center still is necessary. It's a cool place. It has a great history. The Magic Bird Final Four run was here, but like there hasn't been that much. There's been no Huntsman Magic, man. Like Lynn Roberts teams have been fun the last couple of years, but like other than that, it just really hasn't, obviously hasn't struck the chord with the fan base for a multitude of reasons. So it's a cool old building, but I think it makes sense to be able to fund a significant revamp on a antiquated building, even though it's cool.
For sure. And we had Dr. Hill in studio yesterday, and, Dr. Hill, of course, hired Rick Majerus and was around when Alex was a player, and Alex reached out to Dr. Hill and talked to him before he decided to take the job. And this feels, Chris, like a hire that simply has just been given the thumbs up by everybody all over the place. Wherever your spot is in this ecosystem, if you played for the school, if you're in the administration, if you cover the team, or if you're a fan or whatever, feels like everybody's on board with it. Of course, the next step is understanding how the staff is going to look. But what are the boxes that have to be checked prior to finally seeing consistent big crowds in that building?
Yeah, I would start with, I mean, if we're gonna invert the pyramid, like one, star talent, two, tantalizing style play, three, wins. Like you kind of have to have an amalgamation of all those three, and obviously they can come, in waves. Like you can have star talent that might underachieve for a while and blossom into something major. You could be like those BYU teams that, frankly, like in the last decade, haven't been great in the postseason, but like they've played an enticing style of basketball. And, whether it was Dave Rose or Mark Pope or whomever, like they got people to want to go to their games or watch their games. Utah just simply hasn't had that for quite a long time. And like there are other teams in college basketball across the country that have figured that out. Utah, for whatever reason, amongst several generations of coaches now in the last 20 years, hasn't really been able to nail that down. So I think that is one thing that faces Alex like right off the bat. Like he has to get good players and he has to install a system where it's like, I know in this pace and space era, like that is going to be key for a lot. Yeah, I got you. Like I know that is going to be paramount for a lot of teams, and it might work for some teams, but like, just I don't know, man. End up on Sports Center top 10. Like, give a casual college basketball fan a reason to tune in to watch Utah play. Whomever, who are we going to throw out there for the sake of being funny this week? West Virginia. Like, give the people a reason to tune in, and I guarantee you, Utah fans not only haven't really been tuning in the last 10 years or so, but like the casuals who probably remember Utah being, fun way back when, definitely haven't been paying attention. So that matters too.
When it comes to the staff, we've discussed it, but it seems like every time I read anything about it or hear anything from people, there is this feel like, yeah, you got to just get all the Utah guys. You just got to get, and look, I've said this probably 20 times. I'll say it again for those that haven't heard. If Andre wants to come, that's the hire you make. To me, that's a no-brainer, and part of that is me. I'm sorry, I know you want to be a Gen Xer, but I am, and as a Gen Xer, you walk into a gym with Andre Miller on your bench. That's cachet and credibility that's hard to find. But beyond that, I think we're doing Alex maybe a little bit of a disservice by saying, okay, just hire everybody else that wants to have the job that once upon a time may have played at Utah. He's been away from the college game, certainly for 20 years, and he's been in pro basketball on a number of different levels during that time frame as well. And I'm sure he has relationships and has cultivated relationships that are beyond this ecosystem and this community. What sort, and I've been, and I talked to Dr. Hill about this yesterday, if we use the Coach Witt model, he has coaches of all different races, and he tries to balance things out with in-state guys, out-of-state guys, and certainly you need people that understand just the way things work around here. Sometimes I feel like that's a little bit overstated, but generally speaking, as we wait to hear how Alex fills out his staff, what are you expecting to see?
I mean, the fact that he's coming from the league probably lends to the theory that he might be willing to bring some guys that he's met along the way to work with him, and maybe not premier front bench NBA assistants, but guys that he got to know over the years, whether it was in the G League, D League, Jazz, Mavericks, whatever. Alex doesn't really strike me as like the really like super nostalgic type, in that like I don't think he believes that they'll only be successful if they only have guys with Utah ties. And like all you have to do is look down in Provo, and I know Utah fans hate hearing something like that, but like Kevin Young hired a bunch of dudes who really don't have many ties to BYU at all. I mean, he hired Will Voigt, who was, Rudy Gobert's G League coach back in the day, and like was like coaching in Germany. So like, all you have to do is find the right mix of guys and find the guys who are good at recruiting, and recruiting leads to good players, period.
Yeah, it does. Honeymoon period. Because we do this weird thing. I've talked to you about it before, where sports fans just seem to love you until they don't. And the Donovan Mitchell example in our market is one I always go to, where like that dude walked on water until he very much did not. And right now, everything, as you like to say, as the kids like to say, the vibes are high and good vibes around the program, and that's a good thing. You know me, though. I'm going to say it, results over vibes. How long does Alex get before we start doing the thing where we're like, hey, maybe this wasn't the right call?
Well, I'll start off by saying it depends on what his NIL budget is, because I think
100%.
in this era of college athletics, you have to take that into account right off the bat. So if Alex has a treasure trove of money to go out and compete, then like I think you are going to be leaned upon to get results very quickly, because money gets good players now. And we've seen that at BYU. So what are you saying, dude? I'm on the radio. Sorry. We are in an era now where you have to be able to pay good players, and Utah hasn't had good players lately. And he's going to have, I mean, is it unrealistic to say 4 or 5 years? Like, this is kind of the tricky part, bringing home a legend of a program that was representative of a heyday that's always going to be measured up to. Like, I'm not saying it's not going to work out. By all accounts, Alex is a really good coach and a guy that should be able to turn things around. But homecomings don't always work out. I mean, like, you can look as recently as, Mike Woodson at Indiana, a guy who was a head coach in the NBA for a very long time. And I think Mike Woodson was like a star player under Bobby Knight back in the day. And like Mike Woodson didn't have much success at Indiana at all. So I know every example at every school is different, but for me, it's going to start with how much money does Alex and his staff have at their disposal, and what kind of players they can bring in, I say, 1 or 2 years.
Knower of ball and grinder of tape, apparently, Chris Camerati on the program. Good Mike Woodson knowledge. The example I keep coming back to, I can remember when BYU hired Ty Detmer, and all of my BYU bros, all of my BYU family members are like, all right, championship, game over. Ty is the man, Heisman Trophy. And within like 4 games, people down there were like, he has no clue what he's doing. He's never coached college football before.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Ty jumped from like 1A Texas private school football to being BYU's offensive coordinator.
Correct,
I think that was the jump. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you ask Kalani in retrospect, that was a learning moment for him, and like proof that no matter how far back you go in terms of nostalgia, it doesn't always equate to results in present day. And but there are also tons of examples as well. So it's hard, man. I'm always going to be with you on results over vibes, and I'm always going to be with you on, you have to understand this place, the culture here, and how to get the people. And for too long, Utah's missed out on some of the best in-state recruits. Not only to BYU, I mean, they were losing guys to Utah State, Spence. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I know Utah State has is a legacy school. Guys like Sam Merrill will go to Utah State because they're legacies. But like, you got to get some in-state players that are really, really good. I mean, growing up, like when I moved here, there weren't that many good high school basketball players. But since I like got into this job 13 years ago, there have been a lot of good players come out of the state, and like we churn out pro players quite often now. So it's not hard to be able to set your recruiting boundary not too wide, but you got to be able to win the head-to-heads with people in state.
Yeah, 100%. And we keep talking about the Majerus model, where you were able to get superstars like Van Horn and Andre from out of state, Doliak, and then supplement it with the Britton Johnsons, the Josh Grants of the world that played here locally. All right, speaking of results over vibes, the red-hot Real Salt Lake streak, as RSL has won 2 of their last 3. They go down to Houston and get a result, which they never do. My guy, Diego, gets his first goal. Your guy, Diogo, also opens his bank account. Kids, that's a soccer term. So any change in the CK take on RSL after a couple of decent results over their past 3? I mean, I'm refreshing our guy Tom Bogert every day to see if a nine's on the way, but we continue to wait.
No change. RSL ran into a team whose fortunes and current roster construction is much worse than their own. They lost their starting goalkeeper to a torn ACL like 5 minutes into the game. So the Dynamo are down, Spence. But credit to RSL. They won in a place that historically is very difficult for them to win at. Diego Luda, man, like I shudder to think where this club would be without him.
Yep.
Not only from an on-field point of view, but from a marketing point of view, from an excitement point of view. Like, eventually, we talked about this a few weeks ago when I was in the studio with Trey before the CONCACAF series started. Like, when Diego is sold, it's going to be a huge bummer for the fan base. And I think like a fan base that's already kind of on edge, trying to figure out what their plan is, where they want to go. That to me is a very fascinating subplot to this season, because they simultaneously need this kid and need him to star and ball out like he does and like he can. But if a number comes across the desk of Kurt Schmidt and those guys, and you talk to Diego and he wants it, you have to do it. So, like, I know you've talked about how this is an odd point of like contention for you as a fan, learning that like some players just exist to leave, but this is the reality of international club soccer, and it's going to hit RSL pretty hard here, I would say, in the next, I don't know. I think he might finish out the season, but it could happen as early as summer. Last year, nobody really saw Andres Gomez being sold to Europe in the summertime, so you never know how quickly these things can move.
Why haven't you deleted Twitter? I mean, you don't even send out your work anymore.
It's a good place to find things to make fun of people to send to my friends.
Fair, yeah. And I would be sad if that thread ended. I'm just wondering, like, you got anything in the hopper? Anything cooking? Any CK pieces dropping anytime soon?
We'll see. I'm still decompressing, man. I'm hibernating, Spence. I'm not down bad, but you know me, man. I need these rays to come out and grace my skin for several days before I can really turn things around. I'm joking. I'm gonna help out with some March Madness stuff on remote, and we'll see. Like, I'm living the plush life of taking care of a sick toddler and watching Paw Patrol. So that's my day.
As I was fighting through and Monday was your boy's birthday, little St. Patty's Day. So I'm fighting through the hip, the shoulder, the back, shoveling wet snow yesterday morning. I'm not going to lie. You came to my mind. How did that storm hit you?
Oh, it hit me hard, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know I feel like this season of all seasons, we're getting like really crappy, like East Coast wet snow. Like the greatest snow on earth has not graced Salt Lake City like one time this year. It's just been this wet, sloppy snow. And I mean, in theory, I guess it's easier to just push, but you don't want to lift it. You don't want to throw it your back. I know they say like shoveling heavy wet snow is a leading cause for heart attacks in older men. So like we're the age now, Spence, where we got to watch it a little bit. So don't push yourself. I didn't push myself. Leo helped me. I'm probably the reason he got sick. But I guess I'm looking outside right now, and the snow is giving way to brown grass, which is a transition to next weekend. It's going to be 70 degrees, and I'm sure my guy is going to be out somewhere getting his bag of clubs. I would assume.
Chomping at the bit. Cannot wait to get out and play. And we're going to drag you out at least a couple of times this year, right?
I'm ready, man. I don't think I got out last year, and there's only one person not to blame, and it's me. It's everyone else's fault. I hope you know that.
Yeah, no, it always is, Christopher. Go attend to your child, buddy. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, man.
2 hours down. It's in the mix. It's in the conversation.
I think it might be.
I think it might be my favorite Foo Fighters song, excuse me. But Ken Pomeroy sitting across from me, Foo Fighters fan, I believe, yes?
Yeah.
Best Foo Fighters song in the mix, in the conversation.
Yes, that's in the conversation, certainly.
Okay, fair enough. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing well, Spence.
It is your time of year. Ken Pomeroy live in studio for an entire hour, so buckle up. If you've not filled out your brackets, it's time to get some tips, some knowledge here, and I'll take this opportunity to encourage you to go to ESPN700sports.com and join our bracket challenge. You can play against us, the talent on air. That's what they call us. That's not my term. That would be pretentious. You don't fill out brackets very often, if I remember correctly, yes?
Yeah, I try to avoid it.
Yeah.
I try to avoid it. I filled out one. I do have one here, Spence, that I filled out.
Nice.
Against my will, but just to appease folks like you, I have a bracket.
Folks like me.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what that means.
That just means, like, when I do media appearances, people are always like, "Oh, who do you got in your Sweet 16 in the South region or whatever?" And like, okay, I have an answer.
Okay, that's good news.
For that purpose. I'm not entering a pool of any type. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, no pool. Ken Pom is not entering a pool, but coming up in our second segment, we are going to talk about your bracket. And I'm going to take notes because I have a family bracket, I have a friend bracket, and then I've got to try to win this thing again at work, which I've done 5 straight years. It's not a big deal.
Wow.
Humble brag. So, North Carolina, nobody thought that they should be in, right? At least I felt like most people thought that they, kind of got lucky to get in, West Virginia, whatever. San Diego State's a good team. That was not a fair fight. Are you okay with Carolina getting in? I'm assuming that, that's kind of your feeling.
Yes. Yeah, the narrative kind of got out of control with respect to Carolina. I mean, part of it is because their AD is the head of the basketball selection committee. So that was one issue. The second issue is that the AD got a bonus if their team made the field. So that probably shouldn't be allowed. If you're on the committee, I don't think it should be in your contract that if your team gets in, you get a bonus.
It should be illegal.
It's a bad look. It's a very bad look. Even though the AD, Bubba Cunningham, was required to not be in the room for any discussions about Carolina. Nonetheless, bad look. But the reality was Carolina actually did deserve to be in the tournament if you look at some of the more useful resume-based metrics. It was really Xavier was the team that got in that shouldn't have got in. But because Xavier did not have representation on the committee, nobody cared about Xavier and everybody focused on Carolina. And as we saw last night, I mean, that's not proof that they should have been in, but obviously at their best, Carolina is a very, very good team.
I mean, I've watched them here or there this year, and they've got some good wins. But like San Diego State's a good defensive basketball team. They could not do a thing against Carolina last night.
This is like a long-running issue with Mountain West too, where it's like, yeah, you think you look at their profiles and you think some of these teams should be more competitive than they are in these first-round games, and ultimately that was, I mean, just a brutal look for the Aztecs. This was not a great San Diego State team, not on the level of the team, 2 years ago they got to the title game, but it's still a team that, was a pretty good defensive team. They got Magoon Guath back, who is a sneaky, fringy NBA prospect, rim protector type of guy, but they were no match for the Tar Heels.
So Ken Pomeroy, who is one of the most widely respected college basketball minds in the country, has his bracket sitting on the counter in front of me. I feel like it's like the Holy Grail. There's this like magical kind of feel around it. But before we get to the bracket, which we'll do a little bit later, let's start with general tips and pieces of advice. As people, I know you don't love this stuff, but hey, it's, people are going to fill out brackets, and a lot of people filling out brackets now that haven't watched basketball all year. I told you, this is the time of year where I'll get texts from my aunts or, family members that I haven't talked to in a while. Like, hey, will you fill out my bracket?
Potion he's going to come up with to get that team to the Final Four. The general idea is you want to be just kind of loosely informed. You want to be just kind of loosely informed on how good these teams are. Like the NCAA tournament this year, really top heavy in terms of the quality. 1, 2s, and 3 seeds are all probably of better quality than they normally are. So, picking against them, picking some sort of wild upset, I'm not against having fun with upsets, but if your goal is to, stay in contention for your pool, you probably want to avoid picking crazy upsets in the first round or two.
Well, and also, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like I went to the Final Four in Indianapolis back when Florida had Noah and Horford, and it was UCLA when they were on a Flalo. I think George Mason was the team that made it in that year as a wild card Cinderella, and they got smoked. More often than not, Elite Eight, Final Four, the cream typically rises to the top. Is that fair?
That's correct. That's correct. But obviously, you do get upsets. You have the NC State situation from last year where they were like just amazingly lucky to win their conference tournament, and then they got in and won 4 games in a row and got to the Final Four. This year, it seems like it's less likely for something like that to happen, just because there is such heft at the top of the bracket that there just won't be. It's going to be very hard for these teams to get knocked off early. It's not to say you're going to have 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. The chances of that happening are, even this year, are only like 5%. So not great. But you're going to see. I would really be surprised if you have any teams in the Final Four outside of the top 3 seeds, let's say.
All right, of the 4-1 seeds, okay, here's your cliche media guy question of the day. You've got Auburn, who's the number 1 overall seed. You have Duke, Cooper Flag expected to play on Friday. Duke will learn their opponent tonight as the final play-in games are taking place. Then you've got Houston out of the Big 12, of course. And then I told you this a few weeks ago. For whatever reason, and this is a problem I run into when I fill out my brackets, I'll watch a team randomly 4 or 5 times throughout the year, and they'll blow me away. That was Florida this year. Every time I watched a Florida game, I'm like, nobody's talking about them, and they're awesome. Well, they just won the tournament, the best conference in America, so Florida's the other 1 seed. Of the 4-1 seeds, which team would you say either is most prone to be upset early or is the weakest of the 4, and why?
I would go with Auburn. I mean, first of all, they are the lowest rated team in my rating, so they're the number 4 team in the country, which is still awesome, obviously, but the weakest of the 4 seeds. The second issue is that potentially in their second-round game, they will be matched up with a Louisville team that has kind of themselves been under the radar all year. It was kind of badly underseeded in this tournament. Probably should have been a 5 seed, maybe a 6 at worst. They end up with an 8. But the good news for Louisville is that they are playing in Lexington, Kentucky, which is like an hour drive from Louisville. And so, as you may know, Kentucky is a basketball-crazed state.
Sure is.
Should be a pretty good turnout there. I mean, Auburn will have some fans. They'll travel too, but I have a feeling that Louisville will have the lion's share of the fans if they are able to get by Creighton in their first-round game and match up with Auburn. And so that's easily the toughest second-round game any of these 1 seeds will have. So that could be a potential issue for the Auburn Tigers.
While we're in the South, does the committee just take a vacation during conference tournaments? I mean, Michigan wins the Big Ten tournament. They beat 2 4 seeds. They beat a 3 seed, and they're on the 5 line. Like, does the committee just fundamentally ignore what you do in conference tournaments?
I think they ignore what you do on the weekend in conference tournaments. So, yeah, I found it interesting that, there was some complaint about, like the committee not paying attention to the Big Ten championship. I mean, the Big Ten championship game ends like 15 minutes before the selection show starts. So it's really not feasible for the committee to go in and tweak a bracket based on that result. I mean, the graphics are surely already made for the show. And so, yeah, that game doesn't count. If you want that game to count, play your championship game on Saturday like most other conferences. So there's that issue. I don't think Saturday counts very much either. I think the committee has admitted much in the past. Like, it's just so complicated to put these brackets together with all the rules that they have to deal with that for the most part, they're going to lock things in on Saturday unless you get some sort of, non-traditional team winning a conference tournament that you have to slip into the tournament and then give another team an at-large bid, and maybe another team gets knocked out because of that. But barring a situation like that, they're mostly going to say, hey, Saturday morning, our bracket is pretty much locked.
You referenced Xavier grabbing a bid when you didn't think they should. Just kick the tires on some overseeded teams, underseeded teams, some teams you think the committee got wrong.
Well, it's not even so much that the committee got wrong. They got Louisville wrong based on resume. Some of the other cases are just cases where teams are fundamentally either better in the metrics or worse in the metrics than their resume would indicate. So a team like Gonzaga is the prime example of that, and this is not an unusual situation for them. But they get an 8 seed. They're ranked 9th in my ratings. They struggled early in the year against some of the quality opponents they played. Some of the teams they beat early in the year ended up not being as good as we might have thought. And then they got into conference play, struggled a little bit. I mean, the only truly like high-end quality wins you can get in that league are against St. Mary's. They lost both of their games in the regular season against St. Mary's, and then ultimately they did beat St. Mary's in the conference tournament, but it's a team that the fundamental metrics are way higher on them than the resume. So they're more of a quality of a 2 or a 3 seed, but playing as an 8 seed, they'll get matched up with Houston in the second round if they're able to get by Georgia. And Houston will be favored in that game, but it's a pretty tough test for Houston in that second game. And then the flip side of that would be Memphis, who got a 5 seed, won a ton of close games, plays in a weaker conference, ranked outside the top 50 in my rating. So one of the weaker 5 seeds you'll ever see. And then they get matched up against Colorado State in the first round, who's one of the hottest teams in the country. So a chance here for, if the Mountain West is ever going to salvage some dignity, certainly a chance here for Colorado State to play a Memphis team who is weak and also probably, I would say, missing their normal starting point guard in Tyrese Hunter.
So BYU fans and members of the BYU media, and it's just the deal where we have to be upset about everything, whether it's the CFP committee in football getting it wrong, whether Swig closes too early or they run out of sugar, or their basketball team doesn't have the proper seed. I don't know that 6 is egregious. I think you could make an argument for a 5 seed, but to me, the game's in Denver. You'd rather be a 6 seed in Denver than a 5 seed in like Newark or whatever, so BYU fans can drive down there. Before we get to the matchup, what do you make of the seed? BYU is a 6.
Yeah, I mean, if you're quibbling over a 5 or a 6, you need to reevaluate what's important to you in life. In the end, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. I mean, last year BYU was a 6, and they were a bigger favorite in their first round game than some 4 seeds were. So a lot of it depends on the opponent, and the issue here is that their opponent is pretty formidable. I mean, VCU is coached by Ryan Odom. Obviously, we're familiar with him. It's just a really sound defensive team, really good interior defense, tries to take away the 3-point shot to some extent. So they have the ability to make BYU uncomfortable offensively, which is obviously an issue because BYU really depends on his offense to win games. Their defense lags behind a little bit. So the issue here is more the opponent. But I would agree, like, you're playing at altitude. I think that is of some benefit. You're playing somewhat close to home, so you're going to have undoubtedly going to be more BYU fans at Ball Arena than there will be VCU fans. So I think some of those things will help the Cougars in their first round game.
Are you a fan of a flavored soda from time to time?
I'm not really, no. It just, I'm at that age where, you just can't cram a bunch of sugar down your throat.
Sure. Right? I'm not judging. I'm sure Swig is Porter, did you frequent Swig? Have you ever tried one of I've got their menu pulled up. For instance, a Raspberry Dream is Dr. Pepper, raspberry puree, coconut cream. That's a lot of sugar. Do you frequent Swig?
Definitely not a frequenter. I don't really do the soda thing in general, so the soda with more soda or sugar is not my lane, but I have tried what I believe is called a Dirty Dr. Pepper. It was pretty good.
All right. Okay, let's get wild on a Wednesday with a Dirty Dr. Pepper. But over to the matchup, Ken.
Yes.
So as you referenced, and I'm not saying VCU's Houston at all, but like when you kind of dig into what they like to do defensively, they've got 3 6'10" dudes. They've got the A-10 Player of the Year, former Utah State kid. Ryan Odom obviously was here coaching Utah State. The line moved about an hour ago. BYU's a 2.5-point favorite now. It opened up at 3.5. The Vegas action has gone the way towards VCU. Is this upset alert? How does BYU get this win round 1?
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's going to be a grind. That's the other thing with VCU is that their defensive possession length is 10th slowest in the country. So that will gives you an idea. Like, they just force teams to take some time to find good shots, and it also leads to the fact that VCU is 30th in the country in turnover rate. So they're going to force some turnovers in those long possessions. They're number 1 in the country in shooting defense. Once you factor in the value of 3s and 2s, number 1 in the country in shooting defense against a weaker schedule. So take it with a slight grain of salt. But they are not Houston. We don't want to go crazy there, but they are the A-10 kind of version of Houston. And, BYU's going to have to make some shots. They're going to make some tough shots to earn a win here.
Well, the reason I brought up the Houston parallel is, and it wasn't just Houston, Iowa State. BYU beat Iowa State, but as much as there is to like about Yegor Demin as a pro prospect, every time they face pressure, he can't deal with it yet. He's young, and then Kevin goes to Dallin Hall. And look, Dallin has gone through Big 12 battles. He's a vet. There's a reason Mark wanted him in Kentucky. But what happens if BYU is not knocking down their threes and the VCU pressure gets to them? Because against teams that don't have elite length like VCU, as we've talked about, bring in Foose. Let him go to work. But Traore's 6'5", maybe. And these 6'10" kids are going to give him trouble with length. If BYU isn't knocking down shots and the pressure's getting to them, what's the answer?
They're going to have to figure that out. I don't know if there is an answer. Yeah, I mean, but you bring up a good point. I mean, VCU does have size and length of more of a power conference team. I mean, they actually have this kid Bamboye who is starts at center, and he's not much. He's very limited offensively.
Is he the Brit? Is he the kid from
yes,
London?
Yeah, but he's the second best in terms of like rate. He's the second best shot blocker in the country. He blocks a higher percentage of opponent shots than anybody in the country except for one person, and so that's that's what they're facing. But you worry about Jaeger against a defense that's aggressive and forces turnovers. Kevin's shown that he's not, late in the season here, he's not just going to leave Jaeger out there for starters minutes. He's going to make a switch when they need it. But it will be a struggle. But I mean, ultimately they're going to have to figure out how to make shots because there's no other way around this.
Mainly threes.
Yeah, mainly threes. They're I would say they're going to have to figure out to make some threes, and they're going to get fewer of those shots than they normally do. So I mean, that's why just talking about it. I mean, you can kind of figure out why the margin here is so thin. They don't have to go 18 of 36 from three, but if they go have to do 9 of 24 or something like that, that would be really helpful.
So if they advance past VCU, they're most likely going to run into Wisconsin round 2 to get to the Sweet 16. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
Well, Wisconsin, this is not kind of your typical Wisconsin team of the last 25 years. Greg Gard has really modernized their offense. They play at a much faster pace, actually faster than average pace across college basketball. So, this is not a Bo Ryan team that's going to grind a game down to 55, 60 possessions. They're going to play normal basketball. They, too, love to shoot the three, top 20 in terms of three-point rate. They're not necessarily a great team in terms of percentage, but they're going to have 5 guys out there that shoot the three. They're going to, they're big. Steven Crowell is a guy that can shoot plenty of threes and try to, invert the offense and force Keba Keita or Foose or whoever it is to, play some defense on the perimeter. So that's the challenge that BYU would face in the second round. It's, Wisconsin went 13-7 in Big Ten play, which doesn't necessarily sound great, but the Big Ten was really good this year, and Wisconsin did make the Big Ten finals. So it's a very solid team and certainly a step up from VCU.
Before we catch a break, we're going to get into Ken's bracket coming up next, which is sitting across from me. Are you going to take that with you, or do you want to just leave it behind?
I'm going to actually, after this, because this is really my last media appearance of this week, I'm going to crumple it up and throw it in the trash.
Will you let me crumple it up and throw it in the trash?
If you want the honor, you can have it.
Okay, fair enough. So let's move on. We reference Ryan Odom, used to coach Utah State. Jared Calhoun is their coach now, and they're back in the NCAA tournament again. And they're going to get a UCLA team that on the season, they had a win at Oregon. They beat Gonzaga. They lost 4 of 5 during conference play when they got rolling, but they do have a win against Michigan State. They've got a win over Wisconsin. And it's weird to say UCLA out of the Big Ten, Ken, but here we are. Utah State's a 5.5-point dog. Tell us about this matchup.
Well, it's UCLA is actually quite similar to VCU. I mean, typical kind of Mick Cronin outfit here, dependent somewhat on defense. They force a lot of turnovers. It's actually number 1 in kind of an obscure stat, but it's non-steal turnover percentage, which essentially means they like to take a lot of charges. So that's something to watch for in this game. They do force opponents to take more threes than usual, which could work in Utah State's favor. But overall, it's been kind of an up and down year for the Bruins. Never really got a whole lot of consistency. Did win 7 in a row in the middle of Big Ten play, but struggled a little more down the stretch. Got bounced pretty emphatically by Wisconsin in the Big Ten tournament, and so that's kind of the story. So it's you're facing a team that's not necessarily doesn't have the firepower necessarily to run away from you offensively, but that defense is going to give Utah State some trouble.
Lazar Stefanovic, former UCLA Bruin, for a little bit of a local tie. We'll catch a quick break. Coming up next, the Ken Pomeroy bracket. Okay, so if you don't know what you're doing, you're about to fill out a bracket. Ken's going to help you out. Ken stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-priced tire guarantees. It's a one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance. From tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standard in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers doing it better since day one. More information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. Ken Palm himself live in studio for another big segment coming up next right here on ESPN 700. We've got Ken Pomeroy live in studio for one more big segment, and it is time. It is time for the Ken Pomeroy bracket reveal. Ken, I will not go game by game by game. I will not do that to you, okay?
We can do whatever. I mean, that's one of my favorite radio bits.
Wait. Are you willing to go game by game?
I mean, if you want to hear a bunch of radios turn off, yeah, we can do that.
No. First of all, Frank Layden, when I got in this business, he gave me some great advice. He said, just remember, nobody's listening. Okay? So I'm like, thanks, Coach. So the radios probably have turned off. But look, it's that time of year. The NCAA tournament starts tomorrow. So let's dig into it. Let's start in the South region. Let's start in the South, and we'll kind of jump around a little bit, where you referenced Auburn as the most potentially vulnerable number 1 seed, but they are technically the number 1 overall seed. So I would imagine you have Auburn and Louisville advancing, right? Those two
That's
teams?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so let's jump to the next round. Who do you have winning out of Auburn and Louisville?
I'm going with Louisville, Spence.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna take a chance here. Nothing more boring than the chalk bracket, right?
I agree.
So I like to have a little spice to it, and yeah, I think it's a good spot for Louisville. I really think the conference narrative gets overplayed as we get into the tournament, and my bracket is fading the SEC, and step 1 here is knocking Auburn out in the second round.
Okay, so there you go. Upset number 1 on the Ken Pom bracket. Auburn advances past Alabama State. Louisville advances past Creighton, and then Louisville beats Auburn. Let's move down. 5-12, there's always weird 5-12 upsets. Michigan, UC San Diego, then below them, Texas A&M, Yale. How do you have those matchups playing out?
We're going with the favorites in those games. UC San Diego, a popular upset pick here. Michigan, not a huge favorite in this game. Will be a tough win for the Wolverines, but I think they get it done. And then we'll go with A&M over the Ivy Leaguers from Yale, who obviously pulled off a huge upset last year in beating Auburn, but I don't think they can do it 2 years in a row.
I was going to ask you who the Nerds beat last year. It was Auburn. That's right. Yale beat Auburn. So Texas A&M, Michigan advance. Who do you have advancing out of that game?
I am going to go with Michigan. Yeah, A&M's point guard, Wade Taylor, shoots like 39% on 2-pointers or something like that. It's not an ideal situation for key buckets down the stretch. So, yeah, we're going with Michigan in that one. Dusty May, obviously, past experience getting to a Final Four with Florida Atlantic.
Okay. Moving down now, Ole Miss will welcome in Carolina after Carolina curb stomped SDSU last night. What do you think of this matchup, Ole Miss, Carolina?
Yeah, we're going Carolina. They're upset. They're mad at the world.
Yes, they are.
Properly motivated. Not sure Ole Miss carries that same motivation in here, although they are a fine team out of the SEC, but Carolina really, I mean, down the stretch, last 3 weeks of the season was playing quite well. They were, I mean, the ACC is weak, sure, but they were beating their opponents fairly easily. And then, of course, the Duke loss, extremely close and an unfortunate ending there. So, I mean, Carolina really is playing much better than an 11 seed at this point.
Am I remembering the Iowa State upset Drake? I think was Drake a 14 seed that upset Iowa State when Iowa State was a 3 seed back in the day? Is that ringing a bell to you?
It's not ringing a bell to me.
Okay. Well, anyway.
It definitely could have happened.
Once upon a time, Iowa State is a 3 seed this year. BYU beat them twice. Of course, Iowa State out of the Big 12. Lipscomb, I know nothing about. Who wins this game?
I just want to report on Iowa State upsets first.
Okay.
In 2001, they lost as a 2 seed. Is that prior to the infamous Drake loss that we're talking about?
I'm not sure. Maybe who did they lose?
They lost to Hampton.
Hampton, that's right. Craig Bolerjack called that game.
Okay. Yeah, the coach ran off the court and one of their players raised him over his shoulder or something.
That's right.
That seems to be the most famous first round loss. And then Fred Hoiberg lost as a 3 seed to UAB. So some pretty ugly first round losses there. And Iowa State as a team is really banged up. Got some injuries. Taman Lipsey, their starting point guard and defensive pest, did not play in the Big 12 tournament, but allegedly will be back for this one. Keyshawn Gilbert did not play as well. He is not back for this one. I do think they have enough to get by Lipscomb, and I do think they have enough to get by UNC, actually.
So you'll take Iowa State beating Carolina round two.
We'll say the run for Carolina comes to an end.
Okay, there you go. Marquette, 7 seed, taking on New Mexico out of the Mountain West, and you've You're on the record about the Mountain West failures in the NCAA tournament. Does New Mexico have a shot at the upset here?
I mean, they have a shot, but Marquette here, the clear favorite. And, yeah, it's just, when you see a Mountain West team at this point, you really better have a good reason to take them. Marquette, a disappointing year. A lot of people thought they might be something like a top 10 team. Never really quite materialized, but Cam Jones has been outstanding. Number 7 in the KenPom.com Player of the Year ratings. He's their go-to guy and a senior and a leader. And I'm going to throw out all the cliches here as to why Marquette wins this game.
Who was the player? Was Cooper Flagg the KenPom Player of the Year?
He is. Here's the thing about the KenPom Player of the Year. Unlike all the other Player of the Year awards, we also include the NCAA tournament. So we really haven't crowned the Player of the Year yet. If Cooper Flagg is able to play, he'll get it. But if he, for some reason, doesn't play, Janai Broome obviously second, and if Auburn has a deep run, it's still possible for Janai Broome to overtake him.
Michigan State Bryant, right? As they say, what do they say? Death taxes in Izzo in March. Is that the deal? So what
That's
do you
kind of the deal.
215. What do you make?
I mean, Izzo's not. He's not bulletproof in March. He lost a first 4 game to UCLA in 21. Been knocked out of the second round, too, the last 3 years. But this is certainly one of his better teams, probably, I don't know, since going back at least to the COVID year or maybe the year before. Yeah, this is a legit Final Four threat. They have been getting better as the year goes on. Finished the season pretty strong by winning 7 in a row at the end of the regular season. And Jace Richardson, the name to watch here, son of Jason Richardson, former NBA player. But he's a freshman who's played really well, much better down the stretch than he did in the first half of the season. So, yeah, team to watch, playing Bryant, who is coached by Phil Martelli Jr.
Good knowledge.
Yeah, there you go.
Jason Richardson has a college-age kid. Like, when I heard the Boozer twins, like, it just makes you feel really, really old.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been through that a few times here the last few years, so it's kind of I'm kind of immune to that at this point.
It's true. All right, so let's finish off this bracket. In the Sweet 16, you have Louisville and Michigan. Who wins that game?
I'm going with Michigan in that game. Just a little bit stronger team at this point, and Louisville will not have home court vibes when they get out to the second weekend.
Iowa State, Michigan State, 3-2 there in the Sweet 16. Who advances here?
Yeah, we'll go with Michigan State. Just a little bit better team. Iowa State banged up a bit, and I think that'll be the difference there.
So we have Michigan State in the Elite Eight?
Yeah,
wow.
How about that?
That's pretty fun.
Little rivalry action.
Yeah, that's fun.
We're going to go with Tom Izzo.
Okay.
That occurs, by the way, Spence. If that occurs, Michigan State will become the first team, get this, the first team to be seeded first or second that was not ranked in the preseason AP poll to make a Final Four.
Of all time?
Of all time.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Let's move over now to the East, where Duke is the number 1 seed, and they await the winner of tonight's play-in game. Oh, man, I just had the scoreboard up. Anyway, tonight's
American Mount St. Mary's.
American, once coached by former Knicks GM Ed Tapscott. There you go.
Okay.
Do we even need to discuss this? Duke moves on easily?
Mount St. Mary's coached by Donnie Lynn, first-year head coach. I once had breakfast with him at a Panera in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Why'd you go to Panera of all the options?
Well, it was on very short notice, and didn't have a lot of time to make it happen. But that was in like 2019. And,
okay.
And look where he is now, Spence.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little bit of credit for that.
Okay, go to breakfast with KenPom. You get a college coaching job. So I'm sure the breakfast was great. Does he have a chance in this game?
Not against Duke, no.
Yeah.
He has a chance against American. I think he's going to pull it off.
Okay.
But, Duke will beat them by 42 points.
For Jazz fans out there, if Baylor advances past Mississippi State, you will see VJ Edgecombe take on Cooper Flagg, 2 very good prospects. But Mississippi State, Baylor, Ken, who do you like?
We're going to close our eyes and go with Baylor on that one. It's a pretty even matchup. I think maybe my bias against the SEC at this point is coming into play.
Okay.
Baylor maybe was slightly better, like higher end talent, not just VJ Edgecombe, but Norchad Omier, who previously played some meaningful tournament games at Miami. He's one of their better players as well. So we'll go with Baylor. 5-12
out of the East region is the Oregon Ducks out of the Big Ten, which sounds so weird. They're taking on Liberty. Liberty make this interesting, you think?
They could. They've been playing well down the stretch, coming out of Conference USA, another kind of mid-major team that has generally had success at their level and made a bunch of tournaments in recent years. And yeah, it could be an interesting game, but Oregon's just kind of the more talented team, so I'm going to go with them.
Arizona, Akron. And if Arizona wins, we'll have some old Pac-12 buddies getting together. Of course, Oregon out of the Big 10, Arizona out of the Big 12 is wild. Akron 13 seed, Arizona 4 seed. How do you see this one going down?
We'll go with Arizona in this one. I do like Akron. John Gross running a pretty up-tempo system there. That first-round game should be high-scoring. I have the score forecasted as 89-76,
wow.
So it might be the most high-scoring game in the first round, but kind of want to see Arizona advance here a round or two. They're always, you just never know what you're going to get with them and a team that's run by Caleb Love on the court. Whole lot of things could happen. So, but yeah, two teams that really love to get up and down the court there.
Did Arizona lose in the first round last year?
They lost in the second round last year, I want to say.
Did they lose in the first round the year before?
They lost in the Sweet 16 last year to Clemson.
So it must have been the year before. I picked them to win the whole thing. They lost like the first or second round.
They lost to Princeton. Yeah,
that's what it was.
That.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to the 6th-seeded Brigham Young Cougars hailing from Provo, Utah, taking on VCU as the 11th seed. We've already broken this game down. Can Kevin Young get it done?
Yeah, you can get it done. We'll advance them on to the second round. And, I'm not just saying that because there might be BYU fans out there. Like, I actually kind of enjoy picking against the local teams if I can. But no, I truly think BYU will take care of this one, though. It is the highest rated game in terms of, like, watchability on my site in the first round.
Okay.
Yeah, just two, like, good teams. Should be a close game. So it's to me, just as someone who doesn't have a stake in this, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this turns out.
Wisconsin, Montana, 3-14. Ken, who we got?
The Grizz.
Really?
No, we're not going with the Grizz.
Oh, man. That would have been awesome.
It would have been awesome, but we'll go with Wisconsin in this one.
Okay. St. Mary's, of course, the old conference foe, Brigham Young, 7 seed, taking on Vanderbilt as a 10 seed. Who do you like here?
Yeah, once again, I'll pick against the SEC. St. Mary's with the 8th best defense in the country, led by Augustus Marshallonis. Yes.
Shout out to Sarunas, right?
Shout out to Sarunas. Yeah.
Remember the tie-dye, the Lithuania tie-dye jerseys back in the day, yeah?
All right, absolutely, yeah.
All right, so St. Mary's advances past Vandy.
Absolutely, yep.
Alabama, 2 seed. Robert Morris, 15 seed. Ken, you should know that you are talking to a Robert Morris recruit circa 1996.
Really?
I've got like 3 letters from Robert Morris.
That's amazing.
That wasn't amazing. I mean, they're decent now. It was just like a throwaway thing.
I wouldn't throw that away.
Well, that was kind of the level I should have tried to play at instead of believing I could play at the U because that didn't work out. But Alabama 2, Robert Morris 15. Who you got?
Yeah, it's going to be Alabama. But shout out to Robert Morris. They, back in your day, I believe, were in the Northeast Conference.
Indeed.
Now they're in the Horizon League. So they, advanced up a level, and they have been up to the task and won the league this year. So shout out to them. But, yeah, Bama's the far superior outfit here.
Round 2 in the East sees Duke and Cooper Flagg taking on Baylor and VJ Edgecombe. Who you got here, Ken?
I got Duke winning this. We're assuming Cooper's going to be healthy, but even if not, Baylor has really struggled against top flight competition this year. So Duke is still going to be able to. They're still going to be able to get to the second weekend, even if they don't have Cooper Flagg this weekend.
Since you brought that up, do you think they should even play Cooper on Friday against whatever the winner of this play-in game is?
Right. It's a little suspect. I mean, if he does play, you have to think that he's like fully healthy, right? Like it's a great sign if he does play. But yeah, there's really no reason to risk it against Mount St. Mary's.
Oregon 5 seed, Arizona 4 seed, round 2. 2 former Pac-12 buddies here, Ken. Who gets it done?
We're gonna go with the Wildcats. We still on board with Arizona. Just a really consistent season this year in the Big 12. So we think they'll get it done.
BYU advances, according to our model here, to round 2 to take on Wisconsin. So who you got round 2, BYU, Wisconsin?
I'm going with the Badgers. Okay. The advantage there is, Wisconsin has a top-flight defense, and BYU does not.
St. Mary's, 7 seed, Alabama, 2 seed. Ken, who you got round 2?
A fascinating matchup. Two just polar opposites. St. Mary's loves to slow it down, prevent three-point shots. defense heavy. Bama's speeding it up, offense heavy, loves to take threes. It's going to be a fascinating matchup, but I do think Bama will prevail.
Alabama advances on. All right, back up to Duke, Arizona in the Sweet 16 matchup. Duke, Arizona, Sweet 16. Who we got?
Duke, Arizona, and we're going to, again, assume Cooper Flag is back, and if he is, Duke should have no problem here.
Wisconsin, Alabama, Sweet 16. Where are we going?
Alabama back to the Elite Eight.
Elite Eight. And now for the Final Four team out of the East, the winner of Duke, Alabama is?
That's going to be the Duke Blue Devils.
All right, we'll go Duke. So we have Duke out of the East. We have Michigan State out of the South. We'll move over now to the West region. And as I referenced in our previous segment, sometimes there's a year where every time I watch a team, I'm like, they might be the best team in basketball and college basketball. That team for me is Florida this year. We'll start with Florida, Norfolk State.
Yeah, of course, that will be Florida.
Okay, let's just move right over to the back-to-back national champs and a very grumpy coach on the sidelines in one Dan Hurley, but UConn gets Oklahoma. Where are we going here?
Yeah, no one's talking about UConn this year. What's the deal? They won back-to-back titles. Can we give them a little respect?
I mean,
what's going on here?
I grew up 40 miles away from campus. I'm a Hurley guy. I want UConn to win. Can they get past Oklahoma?
They can get past Oklahoma. Yeah, it has been a down year for the Huskies. Poor Danny Hurley missed on some transfers, and the freshman Liam McNeely is kind of the leader of the team, and he's been pretty inefficient. But they do have enough to get by Oklahoma.
Memphis, 5 seed. Colorado State, 12 seed. Will the Mountain West Conference hate, Ken, manifest itself in this matchup, or do you think Colorado State can get it done?
We will go with Colorado State.
Okay.
They're actually, I think, a slight favorite even in Vegas, so it's not even like necessarily going on a limb here, but they have been playing so well down the stretch. Neat Clifford, player to remember, has not appeared on any All-American teams that have been released the last couple of days, presumably because people make up their mind about like 2 months before the deadline.
Yeah.
But he has been awesome down the stretch and certainly one of the 10 best players in the country.
So Dan Marley, once upon a time, was the head coach of Grand Canyon, right?
That's correct.
Now, for some reason, I didn't follow the news cycle, and I just thought he was the head coach until like a few months ago. He very much is not.
No.
But Grand Canyon, 13 seed. Maryland as a 4 seed. Who we got here?
We have Bryce Drew as the head coach of
Right.
Grand Canyon. Don't forget.
Valpo.
98, tournament hero. But it will be Maryland. Maryland, one of those underseeded teams as a 4 seed. Really tempting to pick them to come out of this region. I don't want to spoil it, but they do win this game.
Is Kendrick Lamar in the tournament? No, but Drake is. See what I did there, kids? Pop culture reference. Let's move over to Missouri. Drake, 6'11" seed.
Drake plays at the slowest pace in the country, so this is not a game that I would recommend tuning in for unless you have money on it or something. But I will squeak Missouri by Drake, but this is going to be a real grind and a close one.
Another Big 12 team, Texas Tech. UNC Wilmington is the 14 seed. 3-14, Ken. What happens here?
Yeah, Texas Tech has been outstanding all year, number 7 in my ratings, and never seems to get the respect. They do have some injury issues, a little banged up at a couple of starting positions, but they will get by UNC Wilmington.
Number 7, Kansas. Number 10, Arkansas. Little Bill Self, John Calipari action, round 1. Wow. What do we got here?
Well, this is not like, when was it, 2008, I believe, 2008 title game? Memphis, Kansas, right?
Yeah,
that was
good pull.
Calipari
Good
and
pull, yeah.
Self. Yeah, not quite on that level. We will, again, we'll go with Kansas, but this is a game that looks like it'd be a great one to watch, but it's just really much weaker versions than these coaches are used to coaching.
Rick Pitino has taken the Johnnies back to prominence. I was once upon a time a St. John's fan back in the old Big East days with Chris Mullen and such. Omaha, the 15 seed, didn't mean to do a Peyton Manning impersonation there, but St. John's 2, Omaha 15. What happens here?
St. John's has the best defense in the country. They've lost their 4 games by a combined 7 points. Nobody in college basketball has lost their games by fewer points. Now, St. John's didn't play a super difficult non-conference schedule, but nonetheless, this team's legit, and they will beat Omaha.
Round of 32 out of the West, according to the model that we have in front of us. Florida, UConn, round 2. What happens here?
Florida will put an end to the dream for Dan Hurley.
Can Colorado State keep the Cinderella run going against the number 4 seed Maryland Terrapins?
I think in a different circumstance they could, but Maryland is just a really solid team and it definitely plays better than that 4 seed, so they'll get by them.
Missouri 6 seed, Texas Tech 3 seed. Who we got here?
We will go with the Red Raiders.
Kansas, St. John's, Bill Self, Rick Pitino, another heavyweight matchup.
It'll be St. John's here.
Okay. Florida, Maryland for the right to go to the Elite Eight.
We'll put Florida in the Elite Eight, but do not. If you want to pick Maryland there, not a bad idea.
Texas Tech, St. John's at the bottom of the bracket.
We'll go with Texas Tech to upset the offensively challenged Red Storm.
Okay, and going to the Final Four out of the West region, Florida, Texas Tech. Who we got?
It will be Texas Tech.
Wow.
Our upset special.
There we go. I was waiting for one. There we go. So far we have Michigan State out of the South. We have Duke out of the East, and we have Texas Tech now out of the West. Our final bracket portion of the bracket will be the Midwest. Any intrigue with the Houston Cougars round one or easy?
No
win?
intrigue.
Gonzaga, Georgia, round one.
Gonzaga will pull that out.
All right. We do not have a 5-12 upset so far. Do we have one with Clemson and McNeese?
We actually do, Spence. Colorado State over Memphis.
My bad.
Yeah. We do not have it with Clemson over McNeese. Will Wade is already thinking about his next job, which appears to be NC State. So Clemson will capitalize on that distraction and win that game.
Purdue, 4 seed, High Point.
Yeah.
As your 13 seed, who we got?
We will go with High Point. They are the They are the top team in terms of their dependence on offense in this tournament, and I'm a sucker for offense. They have the 25th best offense in the country. Don't ask me what their defense is ranked. It's very bad, but their offense is really good.
Okay. Illinois, 6 seed, will await the winner of tonight's Texas-Xavier matchup. Does it matter?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I don't think so. I'll go with Illinois.
Kentucky, shout out Mark Pope, former BYU coach. They take on Troy as a 14 seed. What goes down here?
Yeah, I think Mark Pope has gotten more out of Kentucky than you could have expected. They are, like Texas Tech, a little banged up heading into the tournament here, but they'll get by Troy.
UCLA, Utah State, local game. UCLA a 5.5-point favorite. Do the Bruins get by the Aggies?
I mean, I'd love to see the Aggies do it, but it's hard for me to envision them getting by this UCLA team.
2:15, Tennessee, Wofford. Tennessee get this done pretty easily?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's head back up now. Round 2, Houston, Gonzaga. Who you got here?
Should be a great one in the second round. Houston has just been so good this year. They've lost 4 games, Spence, and only one of those was in regulation. So they've only been outscored in regulation one time all year. They've just been so good. I think they'll get by Gonzaga.
5-13, High Point gets by Purdue. Do they get by Clemson?
They do not. Brad Brownell back to the Sweet 16.
Fair enough. Illinois, Kentucky. Does Mark Pope keep it going?
I think so. Close call here. But, yeah, I do believe in Mark Pope.
UCLA, 7 seed. After beating Utah State, they'll take on Tennessee as a 2. What happens here?
Well, we're going to go Tennessee. Despite the long-term struggles of Rick Barnes in the NCAA tournament, Tennessee, one of the best defensive teams out there, and they'll have enough to get by UCLA.
Houston, Clemson, 1-5. Who advances to the Elite 8?
We are a believer in Kelvin Sampson and Houston.
Kentucky, Tennessee, 3-2. That should be a good one. Who you got?
Should be a good one if it occurs. Kentucky has beaten Tennessee twice this year, but we think Tennessee gets revenge in this situation and gets to the Elite 8.
Okay, now for the right to go to the Final Four, it'll be Houston, Tennessee. What goes down here?
I will go with the Houston Cougars.
Okay, so Final Four matchup number 1. Let's start on I guess I'll just say the left side of the bracket. Michigan State, Texas Tech for the right to play for the national championship in San Antonio. What do we got?
We are going to go with JT Toppin and the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, a Ken Palm surprise. Texas Tech in the national championship game, and they will play the winner of Duke and Houston. Who you got?
That would end up being the de facto national title game, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I just think Duke is a team of destiny here.
Duke advances to take on Texas Tech, your national championship game. Who is, Ken, your national champ?
Duke will win 78-68. Cooper Flagg, 22 points, 9 boards, 8 assists, and 2 steals.
Wow. Did you say 78-68?
Yes.
All right, I'm writing this down.
Write it down.
78-68. Duke is your national champs, beating the Texas Tech Red Raiders, correct?
That's correct.
There you go.
Mark it down. Put
There
it in
you go.
ink.
All right. Hopefully you were taking notes. Porter, you didn't copy Ken's bracket pick by pick, did you?
Every one of them.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
Hear the sound? You hear the sound?
There you go. It's
there you
going
go.
away. So I hope you guys were paying attention. There really is nobody better that we could have in the studio to walk you through this exercise, which more often than not ends in extreme frustration.
Exactly.
All right, Ken, where can people go get your work?
KenPom.com. It's $25 for 12 months. So even if you sign up tonight, you'll get 12 months of access. So you'll basically have it for all of next season.
Very nice, my friend. Well, great to see you. Enjoy the action. It's such a great tournament. And even though you don't have any clue what's going to happen, it's still fun because you never know.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
All right, my friend. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks, Spence.
3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, let's get it. Drive time Wednesday afternoon. Much nicer weather day today. The sun is shining here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. It's about 40 degrees or so. Expected to heat up throughout the course of the rest of the week and through a really nice weekend, leading into some 70-degree weather next week. So if you've been waiting for the warmth like I have, it is on the way, and it's good to have you along for the ride. The Drive at 5 is brought to you by the 2025 Big 12 Gymnastics Championship. You can watch the best of the best coming up on Saturday, March the 22nd at the Maverick Center. Get your tickets today at maverickcenter.com. The Utah Jazz are in action tonight. It's a massive, massive game. Two teams with so much at stake. The Washington Wizards roll in town to take on the Utah Jazz. Now, the Jazz and the Wizards are fighting for the honor of being the worst team in pro basketball. Wizards are 15-52. They're 8-26 on the road. The Jazz are 15-54. They're 8-26 at home. So something's got to give. Two teams with 8-26 records in their respective situations tonight. Busy night in the NBA after kind of a light night last night. Of course, the madness of March is upon us. If you missed Ken Pomeroy live in studio, specifically the last segment we did, we went over Ken's brackets. Ken's bracket. Ken never fills out a bracket. He was kind enough to do it for us on the show today. And if you missed it, a lot of good information, a lot of good breakdown. Nobody pays attention to the matchups and the teams and everything in between like Ken Pomeroy. I'd encourage you to go to kenpom.com. I've been a subscriber of Ken's for a number of years. It's very affordable, and it gives you a lot of knowledge. So Ken's, we'll call it Ken's. We'll go over the Elite Eight real quick in case you missed it. Out of the South region, Ken has Michigan and Michigan State advancing to meet in the Elite Eight, which is pretty fun. Of course, in-state rivals there. In the East region, he has Duke advancing to take on Alabama, and that is predicated on the health of Cooper Flagg, and that is still somewhat up in the air. I think there have been a lot of reports indicating that he will play coming up on Friday. I don't know that you play him on Friday against the winner of the play-in game tonight that's going on right now. We'll update you there in a minute. Probably sit him and then save him for what could be a pretty difficult path. Ken also referenced Auburn is the most vulnerable number one seed. Upset special, Ken Pomeroy style, is Louisville beating Auburn in round 2. But he has Duke advancing past Bama there in the Elite Eight out of these brackets. And then down in the Midwest, his Elite Eight matchup is Houston and Tennessee. Oh, by the way, from a local flavor, Ken has BYU beating VCU and then losing to Wisconsin in the second round. Wisconsin losing to Alabama. So as we scroll on down to the Midwest, Ken has Houston and Tennessee. He has Houston advancing to the Final Four to take on Duke. Out of the West region, his Elite Eight matchup is Florida and Texas Tech. Texas Tech, the 3 seed out of the Big 12. They're the number 7 seed in the KenPom.com rankings. And he actually has Texas Tech advancing to take on Michigan State in the Final Four. Ken believes Texas Tech will beat Michigan State to advance to take on Duke. He has Duke winning the national championship over Texas Tech, 78-68. As far as the local side of things with Utah State, Ken has UCLA beating Utah State. UCLA is a 5.5-point favorite in that matchup. So the Madness of March is here. The NCAA tournament is here. It's my favorite event that we have on the sporting calendar. And you can get involved by logging on to ESPN700sports.com to fill out your bracket to play against us. Play against me, play against OC, play against Porter and James, and some celebrity folks stopping by as well to fill out some brackets, namely Coach Gordy Chiesa and others. So if you are interested in playing with us, log on to ESPN700sports.com and join us. All right, I want you to be honest, Porter. During Ken's comprehensive breakdown, were you filling out your own bracket in real time based off his picks?
Negative. I still haven't even filled out a single matchup. I'll wait till after tonight.
I have something to admit.
What's that? You did?
Well, it's not the bracket I'm using for the station, but I did pull up the ESPN bracket in front of me, and I just filled it in with every one of Ken's picks.
Fair.
I'm not submitting it to our work bracket.
But you're submitting it somewhere.
I'm submitting it on ESPN.com.
I respect that.
It will not be the bracket that represents my picks in our bracket challenge. Any early hot takes, like Auburn being the most susceptible number 1 seed? I know you're going to dig in tonight, but any early thoughts?
I don't agree there. Actually, I think Auburn. Well, maybe I agree there in the fact of the schedule, the route that Auburn takes, but I think that they are one of the teams that I'm most confident in being a top seed going forward. One hot take that, I don't know if it's super hot as of last night. I don't think that UNC necessarily should have been in. You could have gone back and forth on that. I'm not on the committee. I'm not going to pretend I dove in at the depth that they did. But that has no bearing on what they do in the tournament. And what I saw last night, the versatility that roster has, the shooting that they have, that's a team that if the jumpers are falling, that's a play-in team, Spence, that I could see making a legitimate run in the NCAA tournament just because of the talent they have on the roster.
Man, they looked really good last night. San Diego State, I think according to Ken Pom, one of the top 15 or 20 defensive teams in college basketball. They couldn't do anything. And as I referenced earlier, as Carolina was running San Diego State off the floor, like, all right, let's check out some Utah Hockey Club action, which did not go well. The Utah Hockey Club got dog-walked in Edmonton last night, 7-1 your final score. Utah Hockey Club has 14 games left, I believe thereabouts, and they need to make up a 4-point gap. And I hate to break it to you, it's probably not going to happen. Would be really fun to have playoff hockey here in Salt Lake during the first year of our NHL experience, but ultimately too many games early on that you let slip away at home, so many games where you led going into the third and you just couldn't close. So Hockey Club got smoked last night by the Oilers 7-1. They're going to take on the Sabres coming up tomorrow here in Salt Lake City. The Utah women, friend of the program, Gavin Peterson. Don't forget, coming up on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m., the Utah women will take on Indiana. Utah is an 8 seed. Indiana is a 9 seed. And if Utah is able to advance past Indiana, most likely, barring some crazy upset, Don Staley in South Carolina will be the opponent round 2. Of course, South Carolina, the reigning national champs and the best team in the country. Fun conversation we had with Gavin Peterson when we did our show up at the Huntsman Center on Monday. For you Utah women's basketball fans, head over to ESPN.com and check out that interview. A lot of fun. So you can hear that game here on the station. It's 11:30 a.m. coming up on Friday. And if they're able to advance past Indiana, we'll see what they can do against the best team in the nation in South Carolina. So a lot of basketball this time of year, a little bit of NFL offseason news. The Minnesota Vikings, I don't know why you have to announce that you don't want to sign Aaron Rodgers, but apparently they're out of the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. So a little bit of NFL offseason stuff kind of going on. But right now, it is the Madness of March with the NCAA tournament getting rolling coming up tomorrow morning. Now, the final 2 games of the mini 4-team play-in tournament are taking place tonight. Right now, Mount St. Mary's has a 36-28 lead over American University. It is on True TV. Stick around for Eastbound and Down replays after the basketball tonight. And then Xavier, Texas will be the game coming up at about 7:10, depending on when the first game ends on True TV. As Ken Pom pointed out, Xavier, kind of a bid stealer this year. Ken doesn't believe that they were worthy of making it in even in the first 4. So we'll see if they can do the same thing Carolina did last night to San Diego State by taking care of Xavier and advancing to the tournament, which gets rolling tomorrow. Now, so right as we start our show, BYU will be tipping off against VCU. Ball Arena, Denver, Colorado. Elevation will be on Brigham Young's side. Now, the line moved about an hour and a half ago for the second time towards the way of VCU. Line opened up minus 3.5 as we sit here today at 5:13 Mountain Time on a Wednesday afternoon. BYU is a 2.5-point favorite over VCU, 2:05 Mountain Time. And then the late-night game, as far as the local stuff goes, will be Utah State, UCLA. First game right out of the gates will be interesting because Louisville is a team that Ken Pom told us to watch out for. Louisville, 8-seed, Creighton, 9-seed, 10:15 on CBS. Then it'll be High Point and Purdue, Montana, Wisconsin. SIU, Edwardsville, taking on the Houston Cougars. Alabama State taking on Auburn. McNeese, Clemson, Georgia, Gonzaga, Wofford, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kansas. That's Bill Self, John Calipari. Yale, Texas A&M, Drake, Mizzou, Omaha, St. John's, UC San Diego, Michigan, then UNC Wilmington, Texas Tech. So a jam-packed day of college basketball tomorrow, and the show will be out on the road, okay? So if you're looking to come hang out with us and watch some games, we'll let you know where we're going to be prior to us saying goodnight, right about 6 o'clock.